Hey there, Wide Awake Horror family. Thanks for tuning in. If you're part of the family, then you're a legend. However, over 90% of you aren't subscribed. So please take this time to smash that sub button and hit that like button to lock it in. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys. One last thing. Leave a comment on where you're listening from. I would really love to interact with my fellow supporters. Comment down a hello too, and we will respond. Your support helps these stories reach new viewers and grows our family even more. I never saw it coming. One minute I was blowing out candles, surrounded by laughter and the smell of vanilla frosting. And the next I was standing frozen in the hallway, the cake clutched in my hand, hearing voices that didn't belong together. That night started like any other birthday celebration. My 21st, the big no turning back into teenager age, and Jessica insisted we host a dinner at our apartment, even though she knew how awkward it made me feel. She said it would be more personal, more us. I should have known better than to trust her on something that involved my family. I'd spent all afternoon cleaning every corner of the living room, fluffing pillows and lighting candles. By 6 p.m., my mom, my dad, and my younger brother Ryan had already arrived, hovering around the kitchen, stealing sips of wine and poking at the appetizers. Jessica was in charge of the main course, her specialty pasta bake, and I took that as a good sign. She'd been acting sweet all week, surprising me with silly texts and sneaky kisses whenever I wasn't paying attention. Just before dinner, I realized the cake had gone missing from the fridge. I remember leaving it in the car because I didn't want it to melt on the ride over. So I grabbed my keys and slipped out to retrieve it. The hall was dim, the door to the parking garage ajar. I hustled down the stairs, trying not to think too hard about how perfect everything was supposed to be. When I got to the car, I noticed the interior light still glowing. That was weird. I always switch it off. I shrugged it off and popped the trunk, grabbing the box with the cake. It was heavy, but that was fine. I like knowing things were substantial, solid like promises. I jammed the box under my arm and headed back up. Then I heard muffled giggles as I reached the third-floor landing. They were too close to be coming from the living room. My heart raced, but I told myself it was nothing, that Jessica and Ryan were probably just messing around. I opened the door without knocking, and everything crashed down. Jessica was half kneeling in front of Ryan. His eyes were closed, his face turned upward. Her hands were tangled in his hair. A cake box dropped to the floor with a dull thud, frosting splattering across the carpet. Silence flooded the hall. I stepped inside, still holding the door handle. Jessica jerked up as if she'd been shot, knocking Ryan backward. His legs hit the wooden floor, and he scrambled to his feet, embarrassment turning his cheeks pink. They stared at me like deer in headlights. My chest pounded so loud I could barely hear their apologies. The kitchen was right behind me, the table still set with candles and forks. My parents' laughter drifted out, completely oblivious. I stood there, trying to process what was happening. Tears welled up, not for me, but for the betrayal. How could she do this with my own brother? Jessica tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Ryan looked mortified. Neither of them had words strong enough to explain the mess they'd made. I picked up the cake box, prying it open, hoping somehow the cake could fix things. Instead, I found the mess inside far worse than on the floor. Chunks of cake mixed with frosting, smeared like paint. It felt like a metaphor for everything. I remember hustling back out into the hallway, cake in hand, mumbling about getting fresh plates. Jessica followed me, tears streaming, but I didn't turn around. I barely heard her apology. It was like my mind went blank, as if something had snapped. Eventually, I made it back into the kitchen, where my parents were lighting the candles on what was left of the table decorations. They didn't notice the cake was missing or the state I was in. For a moment, I thought about telling them what happened, but I couldn't find the words. I settled for a shaky smile as they all sang happy birthday. The tune felt hollow, every note twisting inside me. After everyone ate, I told them I wasn't feeling well and headed to my room. Jessica followed again, desperation in her footsteps. I slammed the door before she could speak. I flopped onto my bed, the mattress sagging under my weight, and stared at the ceiling. There was silence, but it was loud enough to fill the whole room. Hours passed, and I drifted into a restless sleep, waking up to the sound of Ryan sneaking out. He paused at my door, knocked lightly, then slipped away. Jessica never came back that night. When I woke up in the morning, the apartment was empty except for me and notes scribbled on a scrap of paper. I'm sorry. I spent the next week in a daze. I avoided my roommate's texts, tried not to answer calls from my parents, and skipped my morning classes. People asked how my birthday went, and I lied, saying I got food poisoning. They nodded sympathetically, but it was a lie so hollow I hated myself for it. Eventually, I confronted Ryan in the living room. He was sitting at the table, doodling in a notebook. I didn't yell. I just asked why. He didn't look up for a long time, then mumbled something about not knowing how it happened, that he and Jessica just fell for each other. I wanted to believe him, but I was too broken to care. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw guilt, shame, something like regret flickering there, but it didn't change the damage. Jessica moved out a few days later. She took everything she owned, her clothes, her dishes, even the stupid little pillow I bought her on a whim. As she packed, she apologized over and over, but it felt like noise. I watched her drive away, the car taillights fading into the city smog. The apartment felt too big without her, too empty. Weeks turned into months. I stayed with my best friend for a while, crashing on her couch whenever I couldn't face my own place. Eventually, I moved back in, painted the walls a different color, erased traces of what we had. Every now and then I'd run my fingers along the shelf where her picture used to sit, and I'd feel a pang, but not the same heartbreak, more like a dull ache of remembrance. My relationship with Ryan changed forever. We stopped talking about anything personal. I'd ask about his homework or remind him to clean his room, but that was it. He'd nod politely and shuffle away. Family dinners became awkward, silent affairs. My parents never said anything about what happened. I think they had their own version of denial. One night, I found an old video on my phone, a clip of us laughing on the balcony, the city lights glittering behind us. Jessica's head was thrown back, hair loose, and she looked so happy. I watched it in the dark, tears slipping down my cheeks. I realized that once upon a time I believed in forever. Now forever was just a word that tasted bitter. And when will ever completely heal? Every year on my birthday, I still make a point to buy a cake and light the candles, but I don't blow them out. I just stand there, take a deep breath, and think of what could have been. Then I cut a slice, take a bite, and keep going. I thought I knew every corner of his routine, every detail of his life. Friday nights were sacred. Mark went to work his late shift. I cooked dinner, we video called while I ate, and he sipped lukewarm coffee. We joked about how boring we were, how perfect this schedule was. I never doubted him. Not once. After months of this, curiosity hit me like a rogue wave. I'd mentioned once that I'd love to drop by his place with leftovers, maybe surprise him after he clocked out. He laughed it off, said it wasn't worth it. The kitchen at that diner was a sea of grease and empty chairs. But one Friday, fueled by leftovers and a burning need to see him in person, I packed his favorite burrito, grabbed 2 sodas, and headed to the address he'd given me. The diner sat on a noisy stretch of road, neon signs flickering open even though it was past midnight. I pushed through the glass door and the bell jingled. The smell of fries, stale coffee, and cleaner hit me at once. The hostess station was empty, the tables lined up like soldiers. I spotted Mark behind the counter, his hair tucked under a cap, hands moving in loops as he restocked napkin dispensers. He looked up, surprised. I waved, set down the bag. He flashed that grin I loved and waved me back to the counter. I waited until his boss, a gruff guy with a goatee, nodded at him. Mark slid away, wiping his hands on a rag. He leaned across the counter, whispered something to me, and then glanced back at the cook. The cook rolled his eyes. Mark mouthed, "See you in 5," and slipped into the back room. I wrapped the burrito, took a bite. It was cold, but I didn't care. Then Mark reemerged, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Jessica. No wrong story. Behind him was a woman I hadn't met. She had dark hair tied back, a denim jacket over a floral dress, and a look that made my stomach drop. Mark's eyes lit up when he saw her. He kissed her on the cheek, pressed his lips to her forehead. Not like he did with me. There was something tender, dangerous even, in the way he held her face. I felt my breath hitch. He turned to me, and for a moment I thought he'd cover it up. But his eyes flicked away too late. The woman smiled, tucked her hand in his, and together they vanished through a side door. I stood frozen, burrito halfway to my mouth. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Sorry, had an emergency, it read. I shoved the rest of the burrito back into the bag and followed them through the door. The hallway was narrow, fluorescent lights strobing overhead. At the end was a door marked Employees Only. They slipped inside. I pressed my ear to the door, expecting shouting or surprise, but all I heard was low laughter and the click of a lock. I knocked, heart thudding. No answer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. I pushed in, the scene hitting me like ice. Mark and the woman hunched over a small motel table. 2 plates of reheated pasta spread out between them. The pastas were identical to what I'd eaten weeks ago when Mark told me he was working double. On the table sat our twin soda cans, lids removed. I recognized the labels. He brought me one recently, said it was a new flavor he liked. My vision blurred, their heads bent close together, whispers rising. The woman's fingers drifted to Mark's wrist, tracing faint lines. My burrito bag slipped from my hand and crumpled on the floor. They looked up, startled. Mark's face drained of color. The woman recoiled. I didn't yell. My voice wouldn't work. Instead, I backed out, closing the door so gently it barely made a sound. I walked back through the hallway, past the counter, into the empty dining area. The host's stand light was off, chairs pushed onto tables. It was like he vanished. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and a hum of passing cars. I scanned the parking lot. A motel sign glowed under a single lamppost. Mark's old beat-up car sat in spot 14. No hesitation. I jogged there, unlocked a passenger door, climbed in. The motel room key lay on the front seat. It had his name scrawled in marker. I drove. The road stretched out, a ribbon of wet asphalt reflecting streetlights. My phone lit up with unanswered calls from Mark, texts pleading, "Where are you?" and "Please pick up." I ignored them. I knew exactly where I was going, room 213. The motel lobby was deserted, save for a broken vending machine and a flickering tube playing old game shows. I grabbed the key of the counter, the clerk half asleep, muttering, "Enjoy your stay." In the elevator, I rehearsed the questions and asked him the words that scream. But when I reached the second floor, my courage fled. Outside room 213, I paused. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and the smell of cheap air freshener and damp sheets hit me. The bed was unmade, pillows tossed on the floor. The mini fridge hummed in the corner. I stepped inside. Mark was on the bed, leaning over the same woman from the diner. She had her back to me. His hand rested on her hip. They hadn't noticed me. I sank against the wall, breathing shallow. I watched him brush a strand of hair behind her ear, like he used to do for me. I remembered the first time he did that. It was in a park, his touch warm and intent. My phone buzzed again. Another text from him. "I'll explain." I wanted to write back, "Don't." Instead, I stood up and pulled the door closed behind me. I didn't look back. The drive home felt endless. Every pothole jarred my bones. Every red light screamed betrayal. I replayed their laughter in the hallway, their whispered promises in that cracked motel room. I wondered how long it had been going on. He told me he quit weeks ago, but I believed it was for training at the new spot. Turns out he never trained anywhere. He just needed an excuse to hide. When I got home, the front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, and the air felt different. The place where we danced in the living room late at night felt foreign now. His favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter, half filled with dried coffee. I poured it out, the rancid smell reminding me of him. I rifled through our photos on the fridge. 2 magnets fell off. I stared at the pictures, and laughing in his work uniform, beholding that burrito we shared the first time. I peeled them off and crumpled them into a ball. I tossed them in the garbage and shut the lid. Days passed. I didn't hear from him. No calls, no texts. I changed the locks. I told my roommate I needed time alone, which was true in a way I hadn't felt before. I slept on the couch, wrapped in an old blanket he'd given me on our 6-month. I cried into it until it was damp. Eventually, I packed away his clothes. I folded each shirt, each sock, setting them in a box labeled "Return." I left it by the door with a note, "You owe me more than this." I didn't stick around to see if he'd read it. I walked away. Some nights I still crave his coffee, same way I longed for his smile under the diner lights. I miss our Friday date nights, the silly routine that felt safe, but I can't go back. That safe routine was built on lies. Now I make my own burritos, eat on the balcony, watching headlights pass. I don't text him. I don't check his shifts. I don't want another excuse to walk into a lie. I'm learning to trust the quiet. The emptiness in that motel room became a lesson in noticing when things don't add up. I still sigh when the clock hits midnight on a Friday, but now I fill the silence with music loud enough to drown out the memory of his laughter. And maybe one day I'll forget the way he held her hand. But until then, I'll keep driving past that neon sign, proof that some surprises aren't worth stopping for. One Tuesday evening, I was reconciling our expenditures. I planned to surprise Emily by paying the florist early so she could see our bouquet in person. I logged into the wedding fund and noticed a string of ATM withdrawals. 3 large ones, all in a city 2 states away. My stomach flipped. I double-checked the dates. Every other weekend for the last 3 months. That was 6 trips. That was 6 pricey hotel stays. The transaction descriptions were bland. ATM withdrawal, no indication of charges beyond the fee. I clicked into the details, but the bank interface wouldn't show location. All I had was amounts and dates. I felt I had been punched. My first impulse was to call Emily's phone. I held the line, but her voicemail picked up after one ring. Hey babe, can't talk now. I'll call you later. I swallowed my unease, told myself she'd respond. I texted her a quick, saw some ATM stuff. Did you need cash for the expo? She replied within minutes. Yeah, the booth rental place only takes cash. Weird, right? My skin crawled. I didn't press, I waited. When she walked in that Friday night, her shoulders relaxed, her eyes bright. She hugged me, asked about my day. I went quiet. Her brow furrowed. I held up my phone and showed her the list of withdrawals. She stared, blinked, and said, I can explain. She told me the Expo network had a secret code. You had to pay vendors and models in cash. She insisted that it was a niche thing, her own special contacts in the bridal world. She said she flew to Portland last month, then Seattle, then Minneapolis, and that each time she'd snap a few photos to show me later. I asked why I hadn't seen any pictures of actual expos. She stammered that her camera broke at the first 2, and that the last one had restricted photography. I nodded slowly, my trust hanging by a thread. Over the next week, Emily tried to make it up to me. She brought flowers home, cooked dinner, apologized profusely. I wanted to believe her, so I chalked it up to some odd freelance networking scam I didn't understand. But my gut wouldn't let it go. The thought of 6 weekends missing, no university lectures, no time off from her barista job. How did she swing that? I did some digging. I searched social media for the event names she mentioned. Nothing showed up. I looked at hotel websites for those cities. No bridal expos in the dates she'd given. My phone buzzed one afternoon with a notification from a photo app. Location tag, Chicago. I opened the map. It showed a condo building near River North. I didn't recall any expo mention of a condo. That night I waited up. Emily came home at 2 a.m., coffee scented, her hair falling over her shoulders. She tossed her bag on the couch and collapsed beside me. I watched her, and in a burst of recklessness, I grabbed her bag and dug through it. Her lipstick, her notebooks full of sketches. I rifled until I found a boarding pass stub with an airline logo I didn't recognize. The date matched one of the ATM withdrawals. I held it up. Where did you go? My voice shook. She inhaled sharply and sat up, smoothing her hair. Okay, she said softly. I haven't been at expos. I've been going to see Jake. My heart lodged in my throat. Jake was her ex-boyfriend from college, had broken things off because he wasn't ready to commit. Emily and I had spent the early days of our relationship talking about how toxic that was, how she deserved someone who cherished her. Now here she was driving across states to meet him. She confessed that she'd fallen back into old patterns, late-night dinners, walks along river walks, whispering in the dark. She said it started innocent, just catching up, but then he began begging her to stay longer, to talk without interruptions, and she'd agreed, each time thinking it would be the last. I felt my hands tingle. I asked why she couldn't tell me. She said she was ashamed, that she thought it would stop if she lied about the reasons. She swore she wasn't using the fund for anything else. No shopping, no rent. But that didn't matter. It was ours. I didn't say anything after that. I wrapped myself in my arms and let silent tears fall. She reached out, but I moved away. The next day, I sat at my laptop and drafted an email to the bank. I wanted to freeze the account to protect what was left of our plans. Emily cornered me in the kitchen and asked what I was doing. I didn't look up. I can't trust you, I said. I need to think. I hit send. The fund was locked. Emily didn't speak to me for 2 days. I ate cereal for dinner and left the porch light off. On day 3, she knocked on my door, sat cross-legged on the floor, and begged me to listen. She said she loved me, that she'd made a mistake, that the trip fund had become an excuse to hold on to something lost. But each word felt empty. How could I rebuild after that? I told her I wanted space. She packed a bag and stayed with her friend. While she was gone, I cleaned. I deleted our wedding table layout files, moved the forever folder to trash, cleared my bookmarks. I felt lighter and hollow at the same time. I didn't know what to do with the excuses she'd given, the plans we dreamed. I kept the condo boarding pass as proof, flattened between pages of a notebook. 2 weeks later, Emily came back. She stood at the edge of my doorway, eyes red, hands in her pockets. She apologized again, offered to pay me back. I didn't know if I wanted money. I stared at her, wondering if I still recognized her. I can't, I said. Not right now. She nodded, turned, and left. I shut the door without looking back. The days blurred. I discovered that loss has no set schedule. Some mornings I woke up relieved. Others I willed tears not to fall in the shower. I stopped caring about wedding everything. Instead, I focused on small things, keeping my houseplants alive, watching the sunset. My phone stayed locked. My laptop no longer held pictures of bridesmaid dresses. I ate popcorn for dinner and didn't feel guilty. Months passed. One afternoon, I found a card slipped under my door. The handwriting was hers. Inside was a short note. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. I'm getting help. I'm working on understanding why I ran back. I miss you, even though I know I don't deserve it. That was it. No demands, no promises, just words. I picked up the card, turned it over in my hand. It felt like a weight lifted. I wasn't sure I'd reply. Now, every time I see a bridal expo ad pop up on social media, I close it without clicking. I don't think about gowns or cake tastings. I think about trust and what it costs when you break it. I still have that frozen fund waiting to be unlocked. Maybe I'll use it someday, to go somewhere alone, to find something new. But for now, I'm okay just with empty bank transfers and a kitchen table for one. I'm learning to plan my life without all the bright colors, without the borrowed cash and the borrowed love. The spreadsheets are still there, but the numbers don't burn my eyes anymore. I'm just moving forward line by line. It started with a casual dinner invite that felt too good to be true. Daniel told me he was launching a new business with an old college buddy. Some eco-friendly gadget startup he claimed would change the world. He said he needed an extra boost of cash to cover initial travel costs, so I threw in a few $1,000s from my savings. He thanked me over pizza in his cramped apartment, eyes bright with excitement. I remember thinking, this is it. He finally found his calling. For weeks, Daniel was glued to his laptop, video calling suppliers and drafting pitch decks. He talked nonstop about meetings in Bali, how the climate there was the perfect testing ground for their prototype. He described white sand beaches and co-working spaces in jungle bungalows, and I pictured him working on a bamboo desk under a palm-fronded roof. It sounded exotic and purposeful. I began to feel proud, like I was part of something impactful. One Tuesday morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. Hey, saw your name in Daniel's contacts. It was odd, but curiosity won. I replied, asking who it was. A few minutes later, it's me, Lila. Hope you don't mind me reaching out. Listen, you deserve to know what's really going on. My heart thumped. I forwarded the message to Daniel. He called instantly, voice tight, claiming Lila was a spammer or a joke account. He begged me not to engage. I closed the chat. That afternoon, I found an email in my inbox signed friend of Daniel's business partner. It linked to a PDF of what looked like a romantic getaway schedule, flight info, spa bookings, dinner reservations, all in Bali. The dates matched the ones Daniel had told me were for supplier meetings. What struck me was how personal it all looked. A candlelit dinner for two, a villa overlooking the ocean, an itinerary of couples massages. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through. I confronted Daniel that evening at his apartment. He slammed his laptop shut, brow furrowing. "It's a promotional retreat," he said, voice low, insisting the partner was also bringing investors. He pulled up spreadsheets showing travel expenses, lodging, and vendor fees. Everything was business-related, he claimed. His eyes pleaded for trust. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Over the next week, I monitored the wedding of my best friend's fiancé. He's quirky but reliable. In contrast, Daniel's stories felt half-told. He told me he'd be back next Tuesday after 2 weeks in Bali. I marked the date on my calendar. The night before his return, I couldn't sleep. I stared at my phone, scrolling through the photos he'd sent. Cheap snapshots of beaches without people, grainy images of laptops set beside coconuts. There was no sign of anyone else, but the lighting angles felt staged. The following morning, I decided to investigate. I asked my roommate, Mia, to tag along to the airport under the pretense of helping me pick up Daniel's other friend, who was supposedly flying in from Singapore. She agreed, amused at the idea of an airport scavenger hunt. We arrived before the flight landed, caffeinated and armed with excuses. When we spotted Daniel at the gate, he waved like a happy parent. His partner, however, was nowhere in sight. Daniel grabbed my hand and steered me toward the exit lounge. "I told you," he said. "It's just me." The partner had last-minute visa issues. He was sweaty, his shirt clinging to his back. He looked nervous but relieved to see me. We drove home in silence. My heart pounded with questions I didn't ask. That evening, I rummaged through his desk while he showered. I found a series of text messages on his tablet, exchanges between him and someone saved as Bali Buddy. They were planning weekend getaways, romantic dinners, couples snorkeling tours, late-night talks in hammock chairs. One message read, "Can't wait for our weekend alone." Counting down, I snapped a photo. When Daniel emerged, towel around his waist, I held up the tablet. He looked cornered. His face paled, eyes darting away. He swallowed. "Okay," he exhaled. "There's no partner." That was the code name. "Her name is Ava." He ran his hands through wet hair. "She's someone I met in college. We reconnected last summer. I got scared telling you." I sank onto the couch. I felt betrayed and foolish. He leaned in, placing a hand on my knee. "I love you," he said. "It's real." This business idea was real. But so was this. I pulled away. "You used my money," I said softly. "To fund your getaway." He tried to apologize, but I stood up. "There's more," he whispered too late. "I paid for the villa with your money." The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at an empty coffee mug. Daniel was asleep on the couch, snoring softly. I touched my phone, hovered over his contact, then deleted it. I didn't need to hear his explanations. I gathered my documents, the initial agreement, the list of wire transfers, the screenshots of messages, and stuffed them into a folder labeled Proof. Later, I spent an hour in the local cafe drafting an email to my bank's fraud department. I detailed the withdrawals, the misleading statements, the false business claims. I asked for help recovering what I could. My hands shook as I clicked send. I felt a flicker of empowerment amid the embarrassment. That night, Daniel woke me with whispered apologies. He begged me to listen to understand that he had a moment of weakness. He blamed fear of rejection, adrenaline, something he couldn't control. His words dissolved against the walls. I didn't cry. I only stared. In the weeks that followed, I moved out of his apartment. I packed my things in garbage bags at dawn to avoid another confrontation. I sublet a small studio downtown, painted the walls a sun yellow, and bought a cheap bamboo desk of my own. I used the rest of my savings to cover rent, careful about every penny. I didn't hear from Daniel after I left. The texts went unanswered, the calls went straight to voicemail. A month later, I checked my email and found a message from an unfamiliar address. It was a half-hearted apology, a request for a meeting to make things right. I deleted it unread. Living alone taught me how quiet can be both healing and deafening. I learned to fill silence with podcasts, with houseplants named after planets, with books about people who bounced back from worse. I mapped out new goals, a course in digital marketing, volunteering at an animal shelter, saving up for a solo trip to a place I could actually afford. One afternoon, I ran into Lala at a coffee shop. She recognized me, smiled awkwardly, and apologized again for her initial intrusion. We talked for a while about open relationships, boundaries, trust. I realized she wasn't a threat, but a kind of guardian angel sending me the nudge I needed. I told her I was sorry I ignored her first message. She shrugged, said, "Better late than never." Now, when I think about Bali, I don't picture candles on a villa balcony. I picture myself on a crowded bus, laughing with strangers, trying street food. I saved money for an affordable hostel, not a private suite. I don't regret my faith in Daniel's dreams. I just wish they'd match mine. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of my old folder on my laptop. Bali business plan. I delete it. And again. Because I know some things deserve a second chance, but not every plan, not every person. Not when your heart and your savings both end up on a beach you never got to see. It all began with a promise of relief. Our work had turned into a nightmare. 12-hour shifts, back-to-back meetings, endless emails. Olivia insisted I shouldn't feel guilty about the time I was missing with our daughter, so she suggested hiring extra help. She found a guy named Lucas, said he was a trained nanny, great with kids, totally professional. I agreed, thinking it was a good break for both of us. Little did I know that help would cost me everything. Lucas arrived one Monday morning wearing a polo shirt and khaki pants, carrying a diaper bag that looked like it came straight off an infomercial. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and a friendly smile. Our daughter, Mia, took to him immediately, clapped her hands, and giggled when he made silly faces. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, someone else could handle a late afternoon so I could wrap up at the office without worrying. Over the next few months, Lucas became part of our routine. He picked Mia up from daycare, gave her snacks, read her stories, and had her in bed by 8. Olivia would be home by 9. I'd sneak in at 10, exhausted but grateful. Lucas left without making any fuss. I'd never questioned what happened between 8 and 9, assuming it was just daycare pickup and bedtime routine. Then one evening I was running late, caught in traffic, and had to FaceTime Olivia to let her know. I watched her on my phone screen, standing in the living room, voice calm as she said, "Everything's fine." Behind her, I saw the baby monitor feed on her phone. Mia sleeping soundly, the nursery dimly lit. Then Olivia's face shifted, eyes flicked to the side. She tapped her monitor app, zoomed in, and the feed switched to our bedroom camera. My heart skipped a beat. The hallway looked empty at first, but then I saw movement on the far side of the bed. Olivia was leaning over Lucas, his hand on her lower back, pulling her closer. They were kissing. My stomach roiled. I watched, frozen, as Lucas slipped an arm under her shirt, Olivia's hair falling over his hand. For a moment I couldn't breathe. This was our bed. Our daughter slept in the next room. How long had this been going on? I ended the call abruptly and slammed my phone onto the passenger seat. The road blurred as I drove. I wanted to confront them, scream, rip down the camera feeds, but I also felt sick thinking about it. Part of me wanted to turn around, go home, and demand answers right then. But I didn't. I drove straight to a 24-hour coffee shop, parked at a corner table, and stared at the screen of my laptop, pretending to work. My hands shook, and I spilled cold coffee all over the keyboard trying to text Olivia. She didn't reply. After 2 hours, I went home. The hallway lights were off. I crept to my bedroom door and pressed my ear against it. I heard quiet voices, soft laughter. I nudged the door open. There they were, Olivia in sweatpants, Lucas in his nanny polo, tangled together on our bed, not fully clothed, not even halfway discreet. My blood pounded. I backed away and left the door ajar so they couldn't hear my exit. In the living room, the baby monitor sat on the coffee table, the screen showing static from being switched to another channel. I grabbed it and stormed back to the bedroom. I smashed it against the wall. The plastic exploded in shards, and the electrical bits sparked. Olivia and Lucas jumped up, startled. I felt a rush of adrenaline and hate I'd never known I could feel. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I screamed. My voice echoed. Olivia swiped at her lips, eyes wide. Lucas straightened his shirt, his face pale. We didn't mean for you to find out like this," Olivia stammered. "It just happened." I felt my vision blur with tears or rage, I couldn't tell. I grabbed a pillow and threw it at Lucas. He dodged it, but it clipped him on the shoulder. He flinched, and Olivia lunged forward, blocking him. "Stop it," she hissed. "He's the nanny." My laughter was hysterical, like a scratched record. "He's the nanny. You're cheating on me with the nanny." I pointed at her, walking backward until I hit the wall. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Lucas edged toward the door. "I'm sorry," he said in a low voice. "I didn't know." I cut him off, grabbing his nanny bag and emptying it on the floor. Diapers, baby wipes, snacks spilled everywhere. "Get out," I said. "Both of you." They didn't argue. Lucas grabbed his bag, and Olivia slipped into her clothes in a daze. I watched them go, door slamming behind them. After they left, I collapsed onto the mattress, gasping. My chest felt tight, like it might collapse. The sheets smelled like Olivia's shampoo. I sobbed until my throat burned. I thought I would wake up from this, shake myself, and realize it was a nightmare. But it wasn't. It was my life. In the days that followed, I moved Mia's crib into my bedroom. I installed new locks on the doors. I changed all the passwords on the cameras and deleted the apps from Olivia's phone remotely. I threw away every trace of Lucas, the polo shirts, the nanny bag, the baby book he kept. Olivia avoided me. She stayed with her sister. She sent me texts saying she was sorry, that she regretted it, that it was meaningless. She begged me to forgive her. I didn't reply. Work became my escape. I poured myself into projects, back-to-back presentations, late-night emails. Colleagues noticed my dark circles, my edge. I sipped green tea and tried not to think about what happened in our bed. I slept on a fold-out couch, wrinkled blanket pressed to my cheek, listening for footsteps through the baby monitor. Some nights I'd drink Lucas was still there, and I'd wake up sweating, heart hammering. A week later, Olivia came home. She knocked on the door, and I stayed silent. She slipped a key under the mat and entered. I heard her in the kitchen, rummaging for something. I didn't move. She poured 2 glasses of water and carried them to the living room. She sat on the edge of the couch and slid a glass toward me. I stared at it, my fingers curled into fists. "I bought new cameras," she said quietly. "They're in the living room and the nursery. I want you to feel safe." I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, and felt only emptiness. I didn't take the glass. I held up my hand, shook my head. She sighed, stood, and left. The door closed softly. Months passed. I never spoke to her about it again. I didn't press charges against Lucas. Head Flood Town, rumor was another family's nanny had disappeared too. He took no valuables, only his bag and his betrayal. I sold our babysitting gear online, labeled it lot sale. Mia's hairbrush, potty seat, storybooks, all gone. I kept the photo of Olivia and me on our first apartment balcony, sipping cheap wine, the city skyline behind us. It sat on a small shelf in my bedroom. Some nights I'd reach out and touch the frame, tracing our faces. Other nights I'd cover it with a pillow so I wouldn't see it. Eventually I packed it in a box labeled keep or toss and shoved it under my bed. Now I'm juggling single parenthood, date nights that are me and Mia in pajamas watching cartoons, sleepovers with her grandparents. I talk to her about her day, kiss her forehead at night, read her books with silly voices. I don't hire anyone else. I don't want another stranger in our home. I'm learning that safety is priceless, and I'll guard it with everything I have. Some mornings I still wake up expecting to hear footsteps behind the bedroom door, but the hall is always empty. The walls are quiet, and that silence feels like the one thing I can finally trust. I never paid much attention to the little things, like how Megan's phone buzzed every morning at the same time, or how she'd slip away to the bathroom with a smile that looked too private. We were roommates and best friends since middle school, sharing sweatbands, messy buns, and late-night ice cream runs. When she landed that new art studio job downtown, I was thrilled. I knew she needed fresh inspiration, and that place paid better than the coffee shop gig she'd had. But I had no idea that Fresh Start would come with its own secrets. Her first week at the studio, Megan raved about her new coworker, Kara. She said Kara had this magic touch. She'd critique Megan's sketches and help her refine colors, suggest new techniques, even send her articles about contemporary artists. Megan called her super supportive, like she'd found a mentor she needed forever. Every night, she'd gush about Kara's encouragement, how they laughed over lunch and brainstormed big projects together. I was happy for her. I remember thinking, it's so good to see her finally thrive. Then things started to feel off. Whenever I asked about Kara, Megan would drop her gaze and say, "Oh, work stuff." She talked less about the studio, stopped sending me photos of her new pieces. Instead, she'd text me in the middle of the night. "Can you bring me more almond milk? I'm out." Or "got stuck late, don't wait up." I'd tiptoe into the kitchen, leave a carton by her bedroom door, then lie awake hearing her phone light up. It was always quiet, no talking, no laughter, just that soft glow as she typed. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to surprise her at the studio. I'd baked banana bread, the kind she loved with walnuts and a drizzle of honey, and I parked my car 2 blocks away so I could walk in unexpectedly. The building was old brick, with soot-stained windows and a faded sign that read RTS Dry. Inside, sunlight poured through skylights, illuminating paint-splattered floors. I found her in a corner cubicle, her desk piled high with sketches. She looked up, eyes bright, then glanced at the door behind her. A second later, Kara slipped in, her hair dyed purple and pulled into 2 buns. She hugged Megan from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. They held each other like they'd just reunited after years apart. I cleared my throat. It jumped apart. Megan's cheeks flared pink, Kara's lips curved into a hesitant smile. "Hey," I said, holding out the loaf. "I brought us a snack." Megan said thanks, but she didn't reach for it. Kara waved awkwardly. I felt like I'd walked into someone else's world. The air felt heavy, like the studio walls were listening. I left the bread on the desk and backed out. Megan waved me off. I called her later. "You good?" She said she was fine, just busy. I told her I'd see her later and hung up, but my mind kept spinning. What was happening in that cubicle? The next morning, I was making coffee when her phone buzzed on the counter. It lit up with a notification. Cycle tracker. I glanced at it. Megan used that app religiously. I knew the icon. She set it face down without looking. That night, I downloaded the same app, set it up with random data so I could explore its features. I scrolled through forums, poked around the interface, noticed a share with partner option. My heart thudded. What if she'd shared it with someone at work? A few days later, she left her phone at home when she rushed out for a meeting. I grabbed it, hesitated, then unlocked it. She had forgotten to set a passcode. I tapped the cycle tracker app. There it was, her cycle calendar, and a contact label, support /_ with a little heart next to it. I tapped the contact info. The details popped up. Hera. I felt sick. My best friend was sharing her most private data, her period dates, PMS phases with her coworker, marking certain days with hearts as if they were milestones. I scrolled down. On the days marked with hearts, there were notes. Hard to focus. Wear something comfy. Let me know if you need anything. Really proud of you today. Want to see you after. Each note read like a love letter disguised as a supporter's text. The frequency was too consistent. Every cycle, every phase. This wasn't mentoring. This was romance. My phone vibrated in my hand. A message from Megan. "Did you get the almond milk?" I dropped her phone back on the table as if it burned me. My head spun. I sat down, pressed my palms to my eyes. How long had this been going on? Why didn't she tell me? And what did Kara really want? That afternoon, I confronted her. She was at home when I stormed in, phone in hand. I didn't let her explain. I showed her the screen. At first, she laughed it off. "It's just the app's auto notes, silly." But when I pointed out the hearts next to dates, the "want to see you after" line, her laugh died. Her face went still, like someone hit pause. She told me it was innocent, that Kara was helping her cope with cramps and mood swings, that the hearts were just reminders. She swore she didn't see it as anything more. I asked about their dinners after work, the late-night chats, how she'd been missing in action when I needed her. She stuttered, finally saying, maybe it was more than support, but I didn't want to lose her friendship. I felt my chest tighten. She'd been hiding out of fear. I spent the night on the couch. In the morning, she slipped into the living room, holding a watercolor painting. It was a portrait of me and her, our arms around each other. On the back, she painted a note. "I love you, friend." I stared at it, my throat dry. She said, "I'm sorry I lied. I didn't know how to tell you." I looked at the painting, then at the calendar on my phone. "I need time," I said, voice quiet. She nodded, tears brimming. She left with the painting, clutching it like a lifeline. I sat on the couch, the empty coffee table before me, and I realized how much I'd missed her. But trust was broken. She'd let herself slip into something secret, and I felt betrayed by both women I cared about. Over the next week, I texted her status updates. Nothing heavy, just small talk. Bought groceries, saw a great movie. She replied cautiously, "Miss you, and hope you're okay." But I kept my distance. She reached out to me through a mutual friend, asking if we could talk it out over tea. I agreed, desperate to understand why she'd done it. When we met, she cried over green tea, her voice trembling. She said she'd been lonely, that moving to the city for the studio was harder than she expected. Kara filled a void, made her feel seen. She didn't plan to ignore me, she said. She thought I'd be glad she found someone to lean on. I told her support didn't mean secrecy. I told her friendship was built on honesty, not hidden hearts. We sat until the mug grew cold. Then she stood, wiped her eyes, and hugged me. It was awkward, like trying to fit two puzzle pieces that almost matched but didn't quite click. I hugged her back, but I felt a crack between us. Life moved on. We didn't room together anymore. I moved into a one-bedroom near my job. Megan stayed at the studio apartment. We'd meet for brunch sometimes, laugh over coffee, but we never talked about Kara again. The last I heard, Kara transferred to another gallery, me back home. Megan said she was proud of her work, but that she missed real connection. I nodded and smiled, thinking that maybe the lesson wasn't about apps or coworker crushes. It was about boundaries, about calling things by their real names. Now I notice the little things again. A friend who shares her day over text, a roommate who invites me into her plans. Trust has a calendar of its own. I mark the days I feel safe with a simple check. No hearts needed. I'd never thought the person everyone trusted most would turn out to be the one hiding the darkest secret. He was adored, known for his gentle sermons, his way of connecting with teenagers, his advice on finding purpose. I'd volunteered at the youth center for months, helping set up chairs for Friday night gatherings and passing out juice boxes during Bible study. Everyone said he had a calling. I believed it until the night I checked our shared credit card statement and saw a hotel booking with two names, his and hers. It was a Tuesday when I first noticed the charge. I was sorting through bills at the kitchen table late, waiting for my mom to come home. She handled most of the family finances, but I offered to photocopy receipts for her. When I scrolled through the online statement, a line jumped out. Ocean View Inn, 245.67. We never stayed anywhere fancy. I clicked details and saw the description. Room 314 one night. The date was last Friday. That was the same night he'd been at youth group, folding papers for the next week's craft project. My heart pounded. I swore I'd recognize his handwriting anywhere, and under card holder were two first names I knew well. Is, and the other I'd only ever heard whispered in the dark. She was the mother of one of the teens he mentored, quiet, friendly, always at the back of the room, asking questions about scriptures. Her husband worked nights at the factory, which he used to explain her solo attendance. The two of them had become friendly, swapping coffee time stories. I thought nothing of it. Now it looked like something different. I closed the laptop and tried to calm myself. This had to be a mistake. Maybe he booked the room for a church retreat or an event we didn't know about. I figured I could ask my mom before jumping to conclusions. But when she finally walked in, tired from her shift, I couldn't find the words. The screen sat open, room 314 staring back at me like a dare. She asked if I needed help. I mumbled thanks and shut the lid, pretending I'd finished copying. The next day at youth group, he called me aside to thank me for organizing the craft supplies. His face lit up in that familiar way, friendly and warm. I managed to smile and said, "You're welcome," but my stomach twisted. I wondered if he'd left the youth center for a different kind of ministry. I watched him interact with other parents, guiding prayers, offering hugs to crying kids. It felt surreal, as if I were a stranger in my own world. I decided to investigate. I needed proof beyond a credit card entry. I texted the mom one afternoon, just small talk, asking if she wanted to grab a coffee after the next meeting. She replied quickly, "I'd love that." I arranged to meet her at the cafe across town. My plan was to casually bring up last Friday, see if she mentioned anything about a hotel or an event. I sat at a corner table, phone on the table, heart hammering. When she arrived, she was wearing the same soft smile I'd seen at youth group. She hugged me and thanked me for coming. I wanted to ask right away, but I ordered tea and we caught up on her son's project. Then I took a deep breath and said, "Did you hear about the leadership retreat last weekend?" She blinked. "Retreat," she echoed. I nodded toward my phone screen and said, "My mom's statement has a charge for Ocean View Inn on Friday night. I thought it was group related." Her face went pale. She set her cup down, fingers trembling. Oh no, she said softly. I don't know what that is. I pressed. Did someone book it for us? The pastor, maybe. She shook her head, tears forming. I saw how terrified she looked, as if she'd just been caught in something she never meant to admit. He told me my husband and I deserved a night away, she whispered. He said it would help me decompress. I thought it was sponsored by the church. My heart sank. I realized they'd both lied, telling each other half-truths that spiraled into something neither was proud of. She wiped her eyes and said she planned to tell her husband, but then everything got messy. I could barely look at her. I felt like I'd swallowed gravel. That night I confronted him. I went to the youth center after hours, my hands stuffed in my pockets. The door was unlocked. I stepped in and found him alone in the main hall, folding chairs. He looked up, surprised. I held out my phone to show him the statement. He swallowed hard, his face draining of color. I can explain, he said quietly. He told me it was a pastoral support initiative, something he'd arranged with the church board, except no one on the board knew about it. He'd taken her to the hotel under the guise of pastoral care. Then things went off script. His voice trembled as he admitted they'd crossed a line. He said they never intended to hide it from me, that they'd planned to confess after he recused himself from mentoring her son. But when I pressed him for details, he got defensive and begged for forgiveness. I left him standing there, lights dimming in the hall, feeling hollow. I couldn't bring myself to speak the words I wanted to say. Trust, betrayal, hypocrisy. I walked out into the night, the echo of my footsteps louder than any sermon I'd ever heard. The next morning, I handed in my resignation at the youth center. I told the director I had to step away for personal reasons. I avoided the mom when her son asked about me. I cleared my volunteer schedule online. My phone buzzed with messages from teens worried I'd disappeared. I didn't reply. Weeks passed, and the story spread quietly through parents and volunteers. He was put on leave pending an investigation. She moved her family to another town. I deleted his number, unfollowed his social accounts. I stopped praying at night because I felt like I'd been praying for a lie. Now I spend Friday nights differently. I work at a community garden planting vegetables under street lamps. The soil feels honest. I talk to neighbors about soil quality and compost. There are no sermons, no hidden agendas, just the dirt between my fingers and the sound of cicadas. Sometimes I look back at the youth center and wonder if I made the right choice. But every time I see a green shoot break through the ground, I know it's better to plant roots where honesty can grow. I always thought hair was just hair. Twists, layers, highlights, but at Lux Allen, it felt like the currency of vanity, and I was a dealer. The salon sat on a corner where the city bustle slowed down, its black and white awning flipping in the wind like a silent invitation. Clients came in with demands, shorter, bolder, glossier. I gave them what they wanted, and they rewarded me with cash tips folded into envelopes so thick I joked I could retire. Until the day I got a message from a client named Mr. Donovan, and everything cracked wide open. He'd been a regular for months. Slicked back silver hair, tailored suits, a tuxedo echo in his posture. He'd always tipped $50 in singles, sliding the bills across the marble counter with a satisfied nod. I thought he was just someone who appreciated a clean fade, a man who knew what he liked. One Wednesday afternoon, I texted him a reminder about his appointment. See you at 2 for the trim. His reply was immediate, looking forward to more than a trim. I laughed, thinking it was some cheeky autocorrect. Ha, I think you mean a fresh cut, I shot back. No reply. At 2 sharp, he walked in, breathing cologne that smelled like cedar and regret. I greeted him, but he didn't smile. He sank into the chair and held up his phone. This message, he said. What did you think it meant? I shrugged, wrapping the cape around him. I thought you had typo, I said. His eyes narrowed. I meant exactly what I said. My skin prickled. I brushed it off, started snipping, determined to ignore it. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he didn't realize how it sounded. When I finished, he studied the mirror, flicked a finger through his hair, then handed me an envelope. Inside, $80. I frowned. You overdid it, I said. He met my gaze. Keep it, he said. And come by later tonight. I have something special for you. I shook my head. I don't work nights, I said. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and said, I'll make it worth your while. He left before I could tell him to back off. That night, I couldn't sleep. My stomach flipped every time my phone chimed. Around midnight, I got a text. Here's my address. 47 Maple Street, 9 p.m. sharp. I blocked his number and tried to forget. The next day at the salon, I joked with coworkers about creepy clients, but they all shook their heads. He's weird, someone said. Be careful. I nodded and went back to work. Days passed and I thought he'd given up. But a week later, I found a white envelope on my station at daybreak. Inside was a key and a note. You left this behind. It was my apartment key. Panic slammed into me. I raced home. My door was unlocked and my place empty. I checked my room. My hairbrush was gone. Everything else was untouched. My key ring set empty on the floor. I called the salon, left a frantic voicemail, then marched back to work with my heart hammering. At noon, I got a call from Mr. Donovan. Did you find your key? He asked, voice smooth. I snapped, where is it? He sighed. I'm hosting a private gathering. I thought you'd bring a spark. I shoved my chair aside. I'm not coming anywhere with you. Leave me out of this. He said okay, hung up. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I spent that afternoon changing my locks. I asked the landlord for a locksmith. They had extra for a midnight appointment. I told no one why. My hands shook as I turned the new key in the tumbler. My apartment felt safe again, but my mind spun. Why was this guy so fixated? What did he think I'd do? 3 nights later, I got another envelope. This time slipped under the salon door. Inside, a photo of me snipping a client's hair taken through the window. My heart sank. Someone had been watching me. I crumpled the photo and left down the counter. My salon manager saw me and asked if I was okay. I forced a smile and said yes. That Saturday, I was off. I spent the day at a park bench, scrolling through wanting to find anything about this man online. I typed Donovan plus the salon's city name, found a real estate developer by the same name. No pictures of him anywhere. No social media. It was like he didn't exist. I felt a chill. If he wasn't who he said he was, who was he? That evening, I slipped into a friend's apartment. She let me crash on her couch, no questions asked. My phone was off. The next morning, I returned to the salon, determined to quit if he showed up again. I went early, lit a candle at my station. The morning quiet felt fragile, like a clean slate. At 10, the door chimed. A man stepped in, wearing a charcoal coat instead of a suit. He paused, scanned the chairs, then approached me. My heart sank. He sat down, unclipped his coat. He looked different, more casual, less polished, but the eyes were the same cold gray. You made the right choice, he said. You didn't come last night. His tone was flat, almost disappointed. I admired that. I took a deep breath. What is this? Why are you doing this? He smiled, a small, sad curve. I admired your dedication. I thought maybe you'd enjoy the attention. He held out a business card. Donovan Enterprises. It had his name and a phone number. Call me if you ever change your mind. I stared at the card, then dropped down the floor. It slipped under the chair leg. He pushed back, stood, tipped his hat. You're a gem, he said. Then he left. I watched him go, wishing I'd dumped a bucket of hair dye on him, but I stayed seated, trembling. 2 weeks later, I found out the whole truth. Word spread that a client had been banned from every salon in town for harassment. The manager at another shop recognized the description. Same envelopes, same notes. They reported him to the police. A detective called Lux Allen to warn us. My stomach twisted. I realized how close I'd come to something I could never talk about. After that, I changed my number, blocked every call from that area code, and went full do not disturb. I stopped accepting cash tips. Every tip went on the card, no exceptions. I told my clients about the policy. No one complained. If someone did, they got a polite referral to another stylist. Now, when I snip a strand of hair, I think twice about who's watching. I keep my station lit only during hours, lock doors promptly, and remind the receptionist to check IDs if someone asks for private bookings. I still love what I do, transforming wigs, weaving braids, giving clients a fresh start. But I learned that some tips come with strings you don't want to pull, and that a single message can turn your safe space into a trap. Hair might just be hair, but at the end of the day, boundaries are everything. I'd never thought I'd become one of those people who tracks a partner's location. But when Ethan's cousin was on every weekend plan, something in me snapped. He told me his cousin needed moving help, heavy furniture, boxes, couches, so he'd disappear from Friday morning until Sunday evening. We talked late on Sunday night, him exhausted and me sympathetic. It felt caring, like he was family-oriented. I was proud of him. Then one Saturday I saw his location ping on my map app, a remote cabin in the woods, miles from any town. My pulse spiked. It started innocently. He'd say, "I'll pick you up after I finish with my cousin's place." I'd wait, staring at my phone, imagining sweaty t-shirts and bruised knees. Sometimes I'd ask to join him. "Help me help you." He'd laugh it off, saying it was a guy thing. I didn't mind. I thought if I'd tag along, maybe I'd meet this cousin and get to know his family better. But the weekends felt like black holes. I'd binge watch shows, scroll social media, wonder what oversized boxes he was hauling. One Friday evening, I got a text from Ethan. "Can't text much this weekend. Emergencies only." The tone was off, chilly urgent. Normally he peppered conversations with silly emojis or voice notes. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. I figured his cousin's cordless phone wasn't charged. I went to sleep worried but convinced he'd call Sunday night. Sunday afternoon I saw his location ping. Still at the cabin. It had been 48 hours. I texted, "Everything okay?" No reply. I tried calling again. Silence. That's when the knot in my stomach turned into ice. I dressed quickly, grabbed my keys, and drove toward the address. It was a 2-hour trip deep into the woods past winding roads and no cell signal areas. My GPS led me to a gravel driveway lined with pine trees. The cabin loomed dark, smoke curling from the chimney. I parked, heart hammering. I crept up to the front door and knocked. No answer. The windows were dark, but I saw movement inside. I peered through a side window and my breath caught. Ethan was sitting on a played sofa, an arm around a woman whose back was to me. She had long brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, her posture familiar. My roommate's roommate, Sarah, back from summer break. I heard they were tight, but never thought they'd be secret tight. She tucked her head under his chin, pressed against him like she belonged there. My vision blurred. I knocked harder. They jumped apart. Sarah stood up, brushing off her jeans. Ethan stood too, smoothing his shirt. I rushed to the door, yanking it open. The hinges creaked. I stomped inside, ignoring the snap of twigs under my boots. They stood frozen, a coffee table of empty mugs and takeout containers at their feet. "I thought you were helping your cousin," I spat, voice breaking. "Instead, you're here with her." I jerked my head at Sarah. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Ethan's face went white. He ran a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think," he started, but I cut him off. "Oh, really? Because it looks exactly like what I think." I pointed at the sofa at their intertwined legs. "We live together. How long has this been going on?" My voice echoed. His shoulders slumped. He said nothing. Sarah's eyes glistened. She stepped forward. "Please, just let me explain." "I don't want to hear it," I said, voice low. "I drove here, wasted 2 hours because I care about you." I sank onto the arm of the sofa, hands pressed to my temples. My chest ached. "I know you don't have a cousin." Ethan's head snapped up. "How did you hell up my phone? I tracked your location. Sorry for intruding, but I needed to see for myself." He rubbed his jaw. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed, bitter. "You've hurt me worse." I stood, pacing the cabin floor. The air smelled like pine and stale coffee. You lied every single weekend. You let me wait. You let me worry. My voice cracked. Sarah's cheeks flushed. Ethan cleared his throat. It started in spring when Sarah and I reconnected. He glanced at her, softening. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I hid it, I could figure it out before I lost you." My laughter turned hollow. "Figure it out. You created a fake relative, a fake life, all so you wouldn't have to be honest." Sarah tried to touch my arm. I pulled back. "Don't." Her eyes brimmed. "I never wanted to hurt you. We had this history. It felt safe." I shook my head. "Your history isn't my future." I grabbed my jacket from a hook by the door. Ethan reached for me. "Please, let's talk about this." I paused, looking at him. "Talk?" I echoed. "You owe me more than talk." I unzipped my jacket, threw my phone on the couch. "You owe me truth. You owe me time back." I strode out, leaving the door swinging. The drive home felt endless. Moonlight pooled on the road. Every turn I thought he'd call, but my phone stayed silent. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw my car still there, the one he drove sometimes. I realized it was mine. I'd borrowed his cousin's truck this weekend. It made my stomach twist. Inside, everything was quiet. The stack of dishes from last night, the coffee maker still blinking off. I flicked on the light and stood in the living room, phone in hand. I deleted his contact and hers. I deleted the location app. I deleted any photo of us together on my camera roll. The emptiness in the house was so loud I could almost hear my own heartbeat. That night, I crashed on the couch. I pulled the throw blanket over me, the fabric smelling like home, untainted by lies. I sobbed until my tears ran dry. In the morning, I woke to sunlight on the windowsill. My phone lay silent beside me. The house felt unfamiliar. I went to work, packed a bag for my roommate's couch, explaining I needed space. She hugged me, handed me fresh towels, and promised coffee. Over the next week, I sorted through our shared things, kitchen gadgets, DVDs, mismatched socks, and boxed them up. I found a photo album of our last summer trip, the one where we sat at a lake, arms around each other. I stared at our smiles, then tore out the pages, fed them to the shredder. I moved into a studio downtown, small but mine. I turned the key in the lock and walked inside, heart pounding. The place smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I unpacked books, set up my desk, fluffed the pillows on the bed. There were no two sets of mugs, no leftover takeout boxes, no echoes of fake cousin weekends. Just me and a clean slate. Sometimes, late at night, I think about walking back to the cabin, knocking on the door, demanding answers. But I don't. Instead, I pour a glass of water, set my phone to do not disturb, and lie down. I look around at the empty walls and think that honesty feels a lot like sunlight. Bare and sometimes harsh, but it never hides the shadows, and I'm done hiding in the dark. When Sophia first told me about the women's shelter, I was proud. She'd always had a big heart, the kind of person who volunteers at animal rescues or bakes cookies for the homeless. So when she said she was heading out every Saturday to help coordinate clothing drives and counseling sessions, I didn't question it. I thought I was lucky to be with someone so compassionate. Turns out she was lucky in a different way. It started with her stories. Every Monday morning, she'd recount the weekend's events in vivid detail, organizing workshops, collecting donations, hearing survivor stories. She'd smile, eyes bright, as she described the cafeteria volunteers and the supportive staff. I'd nod along, asking about names and faces I'd never meet. I'd send encouraging texts during the week, "I'm proud of you," and she'd reply with heart emojis. Then came the receipts. One Sunday night, I found a small envelope tucked behind her stack of mail. Inside was a bus ticket stub from downtown, fine. That made sense, and a receipt for a cab fare at 1:15 a.m. in a swanky part of town. That was odd. The shelter's doors locked at 8. I asked her casually over dinner, "Why did you take a cab so late?" She said she'd stayed to clean up, and someone had offered to split the ride home. I let it go. Over the next 2 months, those envelopes piled up, late-night coffees, parking meters, boutique hotel minibars, all under the shelter's name. I tried to believe it was more volunteer work, emergency housing, crisis interventions at odd hours. But the amounts were too high. One receipt showed a 3-hour spa treatment at 2 a.m. I raised an eyebrow. She said she needed to distress after emotional days. I felt a twinge of guilt for doubting her. One Friday, curiosity got the best of me. I borrowed her car keys when she was out. I justified it as making sure she had gas for her volunteer shifts. And I checked the glove box. There it was, a small notebook labeled Shelter Notes. I opened it to the back pages and found something entirely different. Dates, times, and locations that didn't match the shelter's schedule. Next to them, initials in what looked like shorthand. JD repeated every weekend alongside hearts and smiley faces. My heart sank. I closed the notebook and shoved it back. When Sophia came home that night, I tried to ask her about JD, but the words stuck in my throat. She greeted me with a warm hug, her coat hanging from a hook. I studied her in the dim foyer light, her hair loose and shiny, her charity badge clipped to her purse. I swallowed and said, "Everything okay at the shelter?" She smiled and said yes, another long shift, but it was rewarding. I nodded, forced a smile, and went to bed with my mind racing. Saturday night, I stayed up waiting for her to come back. At 11:30, I heard the front door. She slipped in as quietly as a cat, coat off, shoes in hand. I sat up silent. She paused when she saw me. "Hey," she whispered. I'm beat. I patted the spot beside me. She sat, hair brushing over my pillow. I said nothing. She asked what was wrong. I watched her face in the low light, tired lines around her eyes. "Just tired," I said. "Long day." She nodded. "Really long." I stopped by the 24-hour diner afterward, the one on Maple. Needed coffee. I couldn't stop myself. Was JG there? She froze. "Who's JG?" My pulse thundered. "I found your notebook." Her eyes filled with fear. "It's nothing," she breathed. "You don't understand." I shook my head. "Try me." She got up and went to the bathroom. I stayed on the bed, heart pounding. When she came back, she sat on the edge. "JD is someone I knew a long time ago," she said. "He was," she swallowed, "my boyfriend before we met." I felt my chest tighten. "Why all these receipts?" She closed her eyes. "I thought I could help him." "He's in trouble," Sophia said softly. "Bad marriage, no job, no family. He begged me to meet, said he needed support after leaving his wife." I frowned. "So you've been sneaking off to him, not the shelter?" She reached for my hand. I volunteered to counsel him under the guise of the shelter program. It was supposed to be volunteer work, emotional support. But then we started reconnecting. I thought I was helping, but I got pulled back in. I pulled my hand away. "You lie every Saturday." Her lip trembled. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I stood, pacing the small room. "You think you did him a favor, but he used our time, our car, our trust." She was crying now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't plan for us to fall back into old patterns." I laughed at her. "Old patterns. You could meet him at a boutique hotel under our sponsor's name." She winced. It started innocent. One coffee turned into more, and I didn't have the guts to tell you. I stopped and looked at her. "You owe me more than an apology." The next days were a blur. I went to the real shelter on Saturday morning, wanting to confirm what programs ran when. The staff there were confused when I asked about a late-night counseling service. There was no such thing. My anger and hurt bloomed into a righteous calm. I called Sophia's name once. "We need to talk." She came home early that day, scuffed sneakers dragging. I told her to sit at the kitchen table. I laid out the receipts, the stub, the notebook. I watched her face drain of color. She tried to explain, but I cut her off. "I trusted you," I said. "I loved you. You traded volunteer hours for secret dates." She covered her face. "I know," she stammered. I lost my way. I slid the notebook to her. "Tell me every page. No lies." She nodded, trembling. She confessed they met every Saturday at midnight in his car, parked on side streets, talking until dawn. She bought him clothes, paid his rent, and spent nights talking about their past. She admitted she still felt something for him, something I hadn't given. I felt a hot surge of jealousy, but also guilt. I'd been so absorbed in my own work that I hadn't been there for her. Still, it didn't excuse what she'd done. I told her I needed time. I packed a bag and left for my sister's place. I needed space from the betrayal and from the memories of her smile when she talked about the shelter. She sent me texts begging forgiveness, saying she'd end things with him, that she loved me. I read them and deleted them. I spent that weekend hiking and breathing fresh air, letting my anger burn out. By Monday, I called her. "I need the car back," I said, "and the shelter notebook." She agreed. I picked them up, but I left the receipts on the porch, unopened. When she opened the door, her eyes were red. I handed her the notebook. "I'll keep this as proof of what we were or weren't." She nodded, barely whispering, "I understand." I returned home alone. The apartment felt too quiet. I rearranged the furniture, clearing space. I listed it on Airbnb for a weekend getaway for someone else, a chance to wipe the slate. I left the car keys on the counter for her to pick up, but I changed the locks before she arrived. I needed to close that chapter. Months later, I still volunteer at the animal rescue at the food bank. I'm proud, but I guard my time fiercely. I learned that good deeds don't excuse bad choices. And I learned that sometimes the biggest charity you can give someone is honesty. Whenever I drive past that boutique hotel, I keep going, eyes on the road, heart steering me toward a future built on trust, not secrets. I didn't think twice when Marcus told me about the executive retreat in Aspen. He said his company was sending him to network, learn leadership skills, bond with other managers, a 3-day, all-male gig in the mountains. I bragged about it to my friends. Marcus is climbing the corporate ladder, I'd say. He grinned and shrugged, said he wanted to bring home ideas for his next project. I believed him. Turns out I shouldn't have. It started the Friday before departure. He packed his duffel bag with crisp dress shirts and a sleek blazer, kissed me, and promised he'd FaceTime each morning. I waved him off, told him to enjoy the fresh air and free breakfasts. I didn't worry when he didn't call Saturday. I figured he was at a fancy breakfast buffet or stuck a hiking trail. On Sunday night, I saw his name pop up on my phone. Hey babe, just wrapping up. See you tomorrow, I smiled, but noticed it was 11 p.m., pretty late for corporate bonding. I texted back, hope you had fun, and went to sleep. Monday morning, I woke up at 7 thinking I'd find a video call waiting. Instead, voicemail. I shrugged. Work had been brutal all semester, so I drove to campus hoping to distract myself with classes. Between lectures, I checked my phone obsessively. No texts, no missed calls. I emailed him, still good to chat. Nothing. I felt a twinge but wrote it off. Tuesday afternoon, I dropped by the house unannounced, key in hand. Remember, he'd given me a spare. I'd pick up a shirt he left behind for share lunch. The door was locked. I tried our code. Nothing. My heart flipped. I rummaged through the living room. His laptop was gone. His suitcase was missing. Even his toothbrush was gone. But on the coffee table was a pile of receipts. Fancy restaurants in Aspen, a spa payment for 2, and the clincher, a reservation confirmation at Chateau Glendale, a vineyard resort 30 miles from town, dated Saturday night. I stared at that paper. Chateau Glendale is a wine estate with luxury suites and private tastings, nothing to do with business retreats. My head spun. I read the name and address again. Then I grabbed my car keys and drove north, following Google's directions through winding roads and pine forests until I saw the vineyard's stone entrance. I parked and walked up the gravel driveway, hoots crunching. The air smelled like grapes and earth. At the front desk, I told the woman I was checking on a corporate retreat. She frowned. That was canceled last month, she said. Your husband's reservation is here, though, a private suite. Apologies for the paperwork mix-up. He checked in Saturday night. Her tone was polite but curious. I grabbed the reservation slip, which bore his name and a note. Suite 12, 2 guests. I rushed past her into the hallway, spotting Suite 12 at the very end. I knocked, heart pounding. No answer. I tested the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed in, startled by the plush carpet and the open balcony door overlooking a row of vineyards. In the middle of the room, I saw 2 wine glasses, half empty, and the second set of keys on the nightstand. I sank onto the bed, fingers trembling. Then I heard laughter from the balcony. I inched toward the sliding glass door and peeked outside. There was Marcus leaning against the railing, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, holding a glass. Next to him stood a woman whose back was to me, blonde hair cascading down a low-cut dress. They toasted, their heads tipped together like conspirators. She slipped her hand into his, and he pressed the glass down, leaning close. My chest felt hollow. The woman turned, her eyes widening as she saw me behind the glass. Marcus straightened and took a step toward the door. I pushed it open. He froze. The woman reached for her dress strap as if to cover up. I stood on the balcony, furious. The cold mountain air made me shiver, but I ignored it. He said, "It's not what it looks like." I laughed, hollowness echoing off the walls. Yeah, because the receipts beg to differ. I waved the crumpled reservation in my hand. Marcus' face went red. I couldn't tell you the truth, he stammered. I needed a break from everything. I glared at the woman. She wore a name tag, Cassandra, event coordinator. I mouthed her name, and she offered a weak smile. Cassandra said, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." I shook my head. "She's an event coordinator for his company," Marcus added. "They met last week. It was supposed to be a business liaison." I remembered him bragging about me and key figures there. So the spa and the private suite were for business. That you two could bond. I spat, voice raw. He took a step forward, but I held up my hand. "Stay back," he sighed, dropping his head. I did take her there for a presentation I set up. We tasted wine with investors. I rolled my eyes. At 10 p.m., when the tasting room was closed, he opened his mouth, but no words came. The woman watched, silent. I remember it all in brutal detail. The Chardonnay-scented breeze, the grapes yielding to the frost, the woman's dress brushing against his arm. I thought about every Monday morning story of fresh mountain air and workshop exercises. They were all lies. He dropped the event coordinator angle and said it was company tradition to treat certain clients after hours. But our credit card never showed client incentive, it showed private gift suite. I said nothing. I scooped up the glasses and tossed them to the ground, watching them shatter. The sound ricocheted off the stone walls. Glass shards glittered like broken promises. I felt tears so hot they burned my cheeks, but I blinked them away. I looked at Marcus, his shoulders slumped, mouth open, and at Cassandra, her eyes apologetic, guilt weighing her down. I stamped on the glass, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. Then I backed away. I trusted you, I whispered. I turned and stalked out of the suite, leaving the door swinging. Marcus called my name. I didn't stop. I ran to my car, hopped in, and floated across the driveway, tires skidding on gravel. The drive home was silent, cold, disorienting. I felt like I'd woken up in someone else's life. Back in our neighborhood, streetlights flickered over my hands on the wheel. I pulled into the driveway, but I didn't park. I sat there for a long time, engine running, replaying every word he'd ever said about the retreat. Not one of them was true. Eventually, I killed the engine, stepped out, and walked up to the front door. I checked my reflection in the window, puffy eyes, damp cheeks. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything looked the same. The couch where we watched Netflix, the coffee mugs we collected on road trips, the magnet he'd given me on my birthday. All seemed normal, but I knew it wasn't. I found his suitcase tossed in the hallway. I picked it up, carried it to the living room, and dumped it open. Clothes spilled everywhere. Silk scarves, dress shirts, and a Ziploc bag of fancy hotel toiletries. I shoved them back in and zipped it closed. I packed it with his laptop charger and his hiking boots. I dragged it down the hallway, out the door, and left it on the porch. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. A text from Marcus. Please let me explain. I stared at it, thumb hovering over delete. I chose peace. I pressed delete. In the morning, I woke late, head pounding. I made coffee, sat by the window, watching the mountain peaks glow in sunrise. I felt empty, but free. Later, I called my friend Jake and said, "Can I crash at your place for a bit?" He didn't ask questions. He picked me up, and I left Marcus' retreat behind me, his lies scattered like broken glass, unworthy of my time. And as the car sped away, I realized the only retreat I needed was the distance between his deception and my future. Leela had been gushing about her new book club for weeks, how they met every Thursday to discuss avant-garde fiction, how supportive her fellow readers were, how invigorating it felt to be part of something intellectual. She sent me pictures of her group's tote bags, snapshots of knees bent over dog-eared pages, and quotes she'd loved. I was jealous of her excitement, but I trusted her, until I realized those books were just cover stories. It started with the invitations. Every Sunday evening, Leela would text our group chat, inviting everyone to the next meeting at her place. I replied, "Count me in each time," even though I could barely finish the assigned pages. I assumed the meetings were at her apartment, tea on the balcony, gentle discussion, the quiet hum of agreement. She said they rotated homes, and last week's host had a cozy living room that fit six perfectly. I never questioned it. Then one Thursday, I rang her buzzer at 8 p.m., clutching a bottle of wine and my copy of the novel. The intercom crackled, and she buzzed me out. I walked into her building lobby and noticed a cluster of people in dark coats waiting at the elevator. I nodded, and we stepped inside. The doors closed, and the lobby faded away. Instead of her floor, we stopped at the basement level, signage for storage and maintenance. The doors opened onto a dim corridor lined with peeling paint and exposed pipes. My grip tightened on the wine. "Follow me," Leela whispered, leading us down a narrow hallway. The air smelled stale like damp cardboard. We reached a heavy wooden door, and she unlocked it. Inside was a brand new space. Polished wood floors, low lighting, plush rugs, and tall candles. A long farmhouse table sat in the center, strewn with books I'd never heard of. The group filed in, murmuring greetings. I put down my wine and laughed nervously. "Great setup," I said, trying to sound casual, but my stomach churned. Leela smiled. Isn't it perfect? She gestured to the armchairs. I sank into one, feeling the fine fabric under my fingers. She handed me a name tag, Maverick. It was odd. None of the tags matched people's real names. The woman next to me wore Thistle. The man 2 seats over was Peregrine. I peeked at their faces and realized I recognized none of them. I thought I was joining Leela's friends. Instead, I was among strangers who'd been here before. She began the discussion with typical questions, themes, character arcs, narrative voice. But as we talked, I noticed strange pauses, glances, and a flicker of shared understanding. At one point, Thistle said, I loved how the red dress symbolized her surrender. She locked eyes with Peregrine, and they both smiled in a way that felt secret. I frowned, trying to catch Leela's eye, but she stared at her lap. At 9:30, Leela announced a break. She said refreshments were in the next room and led us through another door. I followed, but instead of tea and cookies, it opened onto a moss-covered log cabin interior. Twinkling fairy lights hung from rafters. On a low table sat bottles of champagne and a charcuterie spread. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. Confusion settled in my chest. Before I could react, someone slipped an arm around Leela's waist from behind and whispered in her ear. She giggled and leaned back into the hug. It was Peregrine. The moment felt intimate, like a couple. My hands curled into fists. They turned, saw me, and both froze. I felt their eyes travel over my face like I had walked into a secret ceremony. Leela waved at me. Come on, try the bubbly. I forced a smile and reached for a flute, but the bubbles made me cough. My vision swam. I noticed Thistle offering another guest a slow dance and a man across the room pulling someone into a corner. These weren't book lovers. This was something else entirely, a gathering disguised by literature but fueled by hidden desires. I set the glass down and backed away. The wood floor creaked under my steps. Leela noticed and hurried to catch up. She grabbed my arm. Is everything okay? She whispered. I yanked free. What the hell is this? My voice echoed in the cabin. Chairs scraped. Everyone turned, eyes gleaming. Lila swallowed. It's our private club. She gestured around. We read, sure, but it's more about deep connection. People come here to explore chemistry. I stared at her. Chemistry. You lie about this being a book club. My heart felt like it would burst. She moved closer, pleading. You knew it was different. You liked the energy. I shook my head. I thought it was friends talking about books. He set me up to spy on strangers in a creepy basement. I gaped as Peregrine stepped forward. We had fun before, he said softly. You'll enjoy yourself if you give it a chance. I backed toward the door. Layla followed. Just stay one meeting, she begged. You'll see it's liberating. I slammed the cabin door behind me. The corridor behind it was empty and dark. I hurried down the pipes and peeling paint until I reached the elevator shaft. I hammered the call button until the doors slid open on the lobby floor. The night air felt warm and buzzing when the doors opened to the street. I didn't look back. I ran down the block, tears stinging my eyes until I reached the brightly lit cafe on the corner. I collapsed into a chair and called my roommate. Pick me up. I gasped into the phone. Now she arrived in 10 minutes, coffee in hand. I told her nothing except I never want to see her again. The next morning, Leela texted me. Sorry you left early, and we talk. I deleted it. I called her number once. Don't. No response. A week later, she showed up at my door. I didn't answer. I watched from the window as she knocked and walked away. I realized I was done being polite or hopeful. Some chapters are better left unread. 2 weeks later, I changed my phone number. I blocked the cellar door key code she'd given me. I attended a real book discussion at my local library. No secret basements, no chic-themed name tags, just coffee and friendly faces. The novel we discussed was fine, nothing electrifying, but it was honest, and that's what mattered. Now, whenever I smell damp wood or see fairy lights hanging from a tree, I remember that night. I learned to trust the dust jacket, not the author's note. And I kept my next book club invitation strictly to a community center with 4 walls that stay exactly where they belong. I never expected to learn the truth about Ryan while scrolling through my phone at 6 in the morning, but that's exactly how it happened. He'd been so proud of his new code soccer league, talking about it nonstop for weeks, sharing photos of him in that bright orange jersey, beaming after every goal. He said it gave him something to look forward to between his office job and our weekend plans. I thought it was harmless fun, a way to stay active. I didn't know the league folded months ago. It started with a roster email. I was checking my inbox before work, one of those sleepy mornings when I hit unsubscribe on junk mail when I saw it. A message from the league manager, timestamped 3 days ago. Subject line read final notice, recreational league shut down. My heart skipped. I clicked it, skimmed the note. The fields had been repurposed, the teams disbanded, season canceled for lack of interest. And that was 3 months ago. I froze, coffee cup in hand. A dozen messages from Ryan popped up in my phone's messaging app, match schedules, photo uploads, celebration gifts. I stared at my screen, mind racing. If the lead was gone, who was he playing with? I unlocked his phone. He left it on the counter last night and opened the same messaging thread. There it was, an active chat group named Friday Night Squad, filled with banter and match reminders. It didn't add up. I dug deeper. The group chat's header photo showed 6 faces, but only 2 names repeated in every conversation. It is and Coach Alex. I tapped Coach Alex's profile picture. A windowless gym, half lit by graffiti art. No real identifying details. But every Friday, Alex texted Ryan early. Bring your cleats. See you at 7. And every Saturday morning, Ryan sent me another awesome game updates. Only now I realized those updates were from 3 months ago. They were just saved drafts, never deleted. My chest tightened. I closed the thread and pulled out my laptop. I Googled downtown code soccer fields. The search results brought up an article about the league shutting down last December. The fields were now community gardens. I stared at the map, pinpointed the exact location. It was only a 10-minute drive from our apartment. Ryan often said traffic made it take 20. I decided to drive there Friday night. I told him I had to pick up an extra work file from his office. He gave me the key card to his building, nodded sleepily, and I slipped out at 6. The sky was still light when I pulled up to the park. Where the soccer fields once stood, rows of tomato plants and sunflowers now swayed in the breeze. No nets, no lines, no orange cones. I walked around, scanning until I found a small chain-link gate with a rusted padlock. Graffiti on the support pole read, Soccer Squad 2024 Forever. My heart pounded. I circled the fence, expecting to find an alternate field or hidden lot. Nothing. Just more garden beds. I realized I was standing in the exact spot Ryan claimed he'd scored the winning goal last night. I pressed my palm against the metal, cold beneath my fingers. He lied. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I left the park and drove across town to his friend Max's apartment, the only person he mentioned by name from the league. Max lived 2 blocks from me. I knocked on the door. When Max opened, he looked surprised. Hey, he said. What's up? I said I was bored and thought I'd hang out. He waved me in, offered me a beer. On the coffee table lay a framed group photo, 4 guys and 2 women in jerseys, dated autumn of last year. I asked about the date. He blinked. That was our last season. We ended in November. I nodded, heart racing. So, code soccer isn't happening anymore. Max cocked his head. No, the league shut down. We tried to form our own group, but people dropped off. Now we meet up for beers sometimes. He laughed and said he hadn't texted Ryan in weeks. He thought Ryan stopped coming because his job got busy. My stomach churned. Can I see your phone? Just the messages? He frowned but handed it over. I swiped to the group chat. It was empty. No messages after last October. I handed the phone back. Max looked puzzled. This is weird. Why would he keep pretending? I'm not sure, I said, voice shaking. Thanks. I left before he asked more. In the car, tears blurred my vision. I realized I'd been the only person who thought the league was still going. Every Friday night, Ryan had been alone, sending me canned messages he'd written months ago. He was playing with someone else. I drove straight home, heart pounding. When I walked in, Ryan was slouched on the couch, half watching a soccer highlight reel on his laptop. He looked up as I entered. Hey, he said, sitting up. Everything okay? I held up his phone, opened the thread. This chat hasn't been active since October. Your lead shut down. My voice trembled. He froze. The color drained from his face. He closed his laptop and stood. "Listen, I can explain," he said. I threw his phone at him. It landed on the cushion with a crack. "Explain," I shouted. "You told me you had this great community, new friends, weekly games. You pictured me cheering from the sidelines, all eyes." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes guilty. "I got lonely," he said quietly. "I wanted to impress you, show you I had something fun in my life." I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "You invented a fake team just to get my attention." He nodded, swallowing. "I didn't think it mattered that the league ended. I just kept going out there on my own, warm-up drills, passing the ball against a wall. And then I met someone online. Her name's Mia. We started messaging about soccer drills. She said she'd be there last week, so I kept the story alive for her too." My chest twisted. "Mia? Who's Mia?" He looked down. "We met in a soccer forum. She was the only one who reached out after the league shut down. She said, let's keep the weekly game alive, just the two of us. At first it was practice, then coffee afterwards. I thought it was harmless." I shook my head, tears slipping free. "So you've been cheating on me with soccer." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "It's not all the soccer. It's the lies. You let me believe in something that didn't exist. You made me invest my time and emotions." He stepped back, guilt etched across his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." I stared at him, voice tight. "I need space." He nodded, swallowing. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed my overnight bag, and tossed in a few clothes. He didn't follow me. That night I stayed with my sister. I crashed in her spare room, blanket curled around me. I thought about the orange jersey I bought him for his birthday, the photos of him scoring goals, the pretend celebrations we shared. Everything felt fake. The next morning, I returned home to pack up my side of the closet. I sifted through soccer memorabilia, unused socks, shin guards, that bright orange jersey. I folded them all, put them in a box, and set it by the door. I realized soccer had become a weapon in his hands. When I was done, I called him. His voicemail picked up. I left a message. "I'm moving out for a while. Take the jersey and everything soccer related with you." I clicked off before he could plead. I felt a strange relief, like pulling off a tight bandage. Later that week, I visited the actual park where the garden now grew. I stood in the spot where his field had been, the sunflowers nodding gently in the breeze. I closed my eyes and felt a little piece of my heart settle. I realized that believing in him was like believing in that field, beautiful until I saw the truth. Now, when I hear cheers from a distance, I smile politely. I keep my own shoes by the door, but they're for runs in the morning, not imaginary games. Trust, I learned, is never something you can play with. It's the real field you have to protect. I never thought a little weekend cooking class could taste like betrayal until I tracked Priya's Instagram geotags and saw she'd been posting seaside selfies instead of pastry shots. She signed up for those Saturday workshops at the community center, learned new cuisines, she told me, so I bought her a set of chef's knives for her birthday. I imagined her kneading dough in a sunlit kitchen, flour dusting her laughter. What I didn't know was she was slipping off to a private beachfront villa, and the only recipes she was following were the ones in someone else's notebook. It began with her excitement. Every week she'd show me her class schedule: Thai curries, vegan desserts, homemade pasta. She even sent me a photo of her apron monogram with her name. "I'm finding my niche," she said, eyes sparkling. I cheer her on, suggesting recipes from my grandma's cookbook or tagging her in foodie blogs. I felt like her biggest fan, until I realized the recipe for our relationship had gone off menu. One evening, I noticed her phone buzzing with a text. "Are you packing for tomorrow?" It was from an unknown number saved as Chef Mike. I asked her who that was. She said he was the instructor for her next class, and they were finalizing ingredient lists. I said okay and kept scrolling through my own messages. Later I saw her whispering into her sleeve, giggling. I brushed it off as pre-class jitters, but the doubt planted itself in my mind. A few days later, I checked her Instagram stories. There was a photo of her stirring a vibrant red sauce, tagged Downtown Community Kitchen. Perfectly believable. Then a second story popped up. Priya on a sun-drenched terrace, palm trees behind her, with a cocktail in hand. The location read Isla Serena. I frowned. The community center had no beachfront bar. I tapped back through her story. It was posted the same Saturday she was supposed to be in her pasta workshop. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I borrowed her laptop to check something about my work emails and opened her Instagram on the browser. I clicked through her posts, more villa selfies, a plate of exotic seafood, a balcony view of turquoise waters. The captions mentioned Mike and cooking demos, and each photo was tagged at that same island resort. I closed the browser too quickly, but I'd already seen enough. My heart shook. I thought I knew her weekend plans, but she'd been cooking up something entirely different. Saturday morning, I followed her thread. She told me she'd be back by 5, and she'd bring home dinner. I nodded, even though I was at my desk at 8. By noon, I slipped out, telling my boss I had a dentist appointment. Instead of the dentist, I drove 2 hours south to Isla Serena. The GPS took me down winding coastal roads until I reached a gated entrance marked Villa Solaris. I showed the guard a vague excuse, visiting a friend's demonstration, and slipped through. The villa was a sprawling white mansion perched on the cliff's edge, private and luxurious, with a chef's kitchen open to a panoramic ocean view. I crept along the stone patio until I saw her, Priya, in a crisp white chef's jacket, flipping seared scallops on a custom grill. Beside her stood a man in a black apron, Mike. They were leaning close together, laughing, their bodies angled like twins in sync. Mike drizzled sauce over her plate, and she reached out, brushing his hand. My chest pressed so tight I thought I'd suffocate. I stayed hidden, heart pounding, watching them move around the kitchen island with ease. Priya's hair was pulled back into a neat bun. Her face was radiant, alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. I remember the nights she told me she was exhausted from standing in a fluorescent-lit workshop, but here she was under golden sunlight, barefoot on the tiled floor, cooking with someone who wasn't me. My phone buzzed. It was her text. "Running late. Hope you're okay." I ignored it, nearly dropping my phone. I kept watching as Mike wiped his hands on a towel, approached Priya, and kissed her cheek. She smiled in a way I thought was reserved for me. Each moment felt like a betrayal simmering on a low flame until it boiled over. I backed away and slipped off the villa grounds, my vision blurred with tears. The air smelled of salt and rosemary. I felt like a fool for trusting her stories about cumin and coriander instead of seeing the truth. I drove home in a daze, replaying every spatula lift, every shared glance. When I walked through our front door, she was there, holding a grocery bag. She looked hopeful. "I got the ingredients we need," she said. "Thought we could try those curry dumplings tonight." I set the bag down and walked away, unable to meet her eyes. She followed me to the kitchen. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. I turned, face stiff. "Where were you?" I demanded. She blinked. "I was at my cooking class," she said. I crossed my arms. "At Isla Serena with Mike." Her color drained. She stammered, eyed, but I cut her off. "I saw you. You weren't in any community center. You were in a villa with him." My voice cracked. She closed her eyes and exhaled. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I felt tears spill down my cheeks. So cooking for me was a lie. She took a step forward, reaching out. I stepped back. I thought I could balance both worlds. I love cooking and I love him. And I love you too, but I couldn't tell you because you hated. My throat burned. You used my interest in your hobby to hide your affair. She shook her head, voice small. "It started innocently. Mike offered me a chance to demo on a real setup. I told you it was weekend classes to keep the stress down." My fists clenched. "You let me buy you knives, aprons, cookbooks, all to support your lie." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never wanted to hurt you." I turned away, tears smudging my vision. "I need space," I said. She nodded and left the apartment. I slammed the door. I sank to the floor, the kitchen tile cold beneath my palms. The grocery bag lay unopened, a silent witness to her deception. That night I slept on the food in our guest room, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about flavor and trust. I thought about the kitchen we built together, now stripped of purpose. In the morning, I packed a small bag, clothes, my work laptop, the cookbook she'd bought me last Christmas. I left it by the door with a note. "I'm staying elsewhere for a bit." She texted me later, "Please talk to me." I deleted it. I needed time to digest the truth, like letting dough rise before shaving it. Over the next few days, I stayed with my sister. I dipped into the cookbook, made simple omelets and salads, trusting only basic ingredients. The eggs and greens were honest, no hidden geotags or secret kettles. I saw her once when I returned to grab a few things. She was on the porch, head bowed. I locked eyes with her for a moment. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," without words. I locked the door, grabbed my bag, and left without looking back. Weeks later, I read with a cookbook on my balcony and read an old note she'd scrawled inside. To love and to share. I thought about sharing more than recipes, sharing secrets and boundaries. I tore out that page and fed it to the shredder. The curls of white paper landed like fallen pebbles. Now, when I cook, I stick to my simple omelette, the lasagna I learned from my grandma, and the steak I grill in my backyard. I don't need Villa Sunshine or exotic demos. I just need honesty, a pinch of salt, and the knowledge that some secrets don't belong in any recipe. He told me he was mentoring a kid from the neighborhood, someone who needed guidance, a positive role model to stay out of trouble. He'd gush about weekly meetings at the community center, how rewarding it was to help someone find direction. I was proud of him. Then one afternoon, I decided to surprise him by dropping by the center, and everything unraveled. It was a Tuesday when I showed up. The center sign hung over the door, bright and welcoming. I walked in expecting to find Oscar and his mentee in the library corner, maybe flipping through books or solving math problems. Instead, the coordinator at the front desk looked puzzled when I asked about Oscar's sessions. "He hasn't been here in weeks," she said, shaking her head. "We tried calling him, but he stopped responding." My heart clenched. I asked for the kid's name, TJ, and she confirmed he never met anyone named Oscar. My stomach dropped. I left the center in a daze. Oscar had told me he was committed, excited about the program, always there Tuesdays after work. But the truth was he'd never shown up. I stood on the sidewalk, sun beating down, and realized I'd been believing lies. I decided to dig deeper. I called the number he said belonged to the program's director. It went to voicemail. I checked his calendar. Tuesdays marked mentoring session, but nothing else. It was all for show. That Friday, determined to find the truth, I tracked down TJ's family via public school records. I drove to their address, an old row house 2 blocks from our apartment. I knocked on the door, trying to steady my voice. A woman answered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When I mentioned Oscar's name, her eyes widened. "Never heard of him," she said. "Our son has been waiting for weeks. They said he'd come by, but he never did." I apologized, stumbled back to my car, and sank into the driver's seat. The realization hit me hard. While he was pretending to save a young life, he was hiding something else entirely. That evening, I confronted Oscar at home. He was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. He turned at the sound of the front door. "Hey, you're home early," he said casually. I dropped my purse on the table and said, "We need to talk about your mentoring." He paused, knife hovering over the pepper. "What mentoring?" I felt rage flare. I told him about the center, the coordinator's confusion, the family who'd never met him. His face went pale. He dropped the knife and washed his hands. He led me to the living room and sank onto the couch. "Okay," he began quietly. "I wasn't actually mentoring anyone. I mean, I signed up, but I never showed." I felt my jaw clench. "Then what were you doing on Tuesday nights?" I asked. He closed his eyes and exhaled. "I was going to dinner with someone." My chest tightened. "Dinner?" I echoed. "Yes," he said. "Her name is Canela. We met at a networking event. She invited me to join her." I remembered him talking about a professional contact and wondered why he never mentioned her name. He tried to explain that Canela was going through a rough patch, divorce, job loss, and he wanted to be there for her as a friend. That made sense at first, but it didn't explain weekly Canela dinners at expensive restaurants. I asked why he couldn't tell me. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "I thought you judged me for hanging out with someone struggling, but keeping it a secret hurt far more." He showed me text messages on his phone, messages with C saved as a heart emoji. Every Tuesday evening, reminders popped up. "Don't forget tonight. Can't wait to see you. I'll pick you up at 6. I scrolled through and felt sick. He replaced mentoring appointments with private dates, pretending to be busy helping a kid in need when he was actually helping himself to someone else's affection. I told him I needed time to process. He nodded, tears in his eyes, and left the apartment. I spent the night on the couch, gripping a blanket, replaying every lie he told. The following morning, I packed a bag with essentials and left for my sister's house. Oscar called a dozen times, left messages begging forgiveness, promising it would never happen again. I didn't respond. At my sister's, I crashed on her spare bed and tried to distract myself with movies and her dog's sloppy kisses. But my mind kept drifting back to Oscar in those Camelot booths, pressing the same forkful of food to someone else's lips. I felt foolish for trusting him, but also betrayed at the thought that he chose secrecy over honesty. After 3 days, I returned home to collect my things. Oscar was waiting at the door. He looked exhausted, haggard. I stood on the threshold, suitcase in hand. He said, "I've already canceled my meetings with Camilla. I signed up for the mentoring program again. I want to prove I can be honest." I studied his face. His eyes were earnest, but I didn't know if I could believe him. I walked into the apartment, set down my bag, and said, "You need to earn my trust back." He nodded and followed me to the calendar on the fridge. I erased the old mentoring marks and said, "Show me you'll actually go." He wrote, "In mentoring teach A every Tuesday." I crossed my arms. "And no more secrets." He added a small note under each entry. "Text me after." It felt like a start. The next Tuesday, I waited for his call. I paced the living room until my phone buzzed. Left early, great session. I exhaled, relief and skepticism warring inside me. He called again on Thursday. "Meeting went well, TJ is doing better." I replied with a thumbs up emoji. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Over the next month, I watched him show up at the center. Sweater vest, clean notebook, pen in hand. I dropped by unannounced once and saw him helping TJ with algebra problems. The kid looked up and waved. I felt a hesitant warmth in my chest. I realized real mentoring was taking place, not just a cover for secret dinners. One evening, Oscar made dinner at home, stir-fry with tofu, vegetables from the farmer's market. He set plates on the counter and said, "I missed this." I smiled and said, "Me too." We ate in comfortable silence, the window open to a cool breeze. I thought about the damage done, but also about how he'd chosen to rebuild something real. It's been 3 months since I discovered the lie. Oscar still meets TJ every Tuesday. I see the kid grow more confident each week. Oscar tells me about the boy's dreams of college, his efforts to stay out of trouble, and the pride he feels. I believe him now. Mentoring isn't a front anymore. It's his truth. Trust isn't restored overnight. It's like planting a seed and waiting for the shoot to break through soil. I still watch the calendar entries, still brace for disappointment. But each Tuesday call reminds me that honesty matters more than any secret dinner. And maybe, just maybe, the real mentorship here was for both of us, to learn that the best way to help someone is to start by telling the truth. She'd been talking about this retreat for months. How it would cleanse her mind, rebuild her spirit, how no talking was allowed, just breath work and sunrise salutations. She said she paid in full, packed her own mat, and even downloaded a special playlist of chanting. I was proud of her dedication to self-care. I had no clue she was sneaking off to a boutique hotel downtown, swapping yoga pants for silk robes, and taking late-night selfies with someone who wasn't me. It started innocently enough. She showed me the brochure. A sprawling ashram in the mountains, candlelit studios, and no Wi-Fi. "It's a true detox," she told me with a dreamy smile. I bought her a fancy travel mug for the journey. The night before she left, we sat on our balcony sipping herbal tea, and she whispered, "I'll be so present when I get back." I believed her. Her plane left at dawn, and I didn't worry when she didn't text. I imagined her in oversized sweaters, curled up with green smoothies and meditation CDs. Day 2, still nothing. Day 3, I found her Instagram tag in my feed. Someone posted a photo of a yoga mat rolled out in a bamboo grove. The location read Sahara Solitude Retreat. Perfect. On day 4, I saw another tag, the same mat photo, but someone else posted a shot of a gilded hotel lobby, modern art on the walls. Location read Hotel Aurelia. I frowned. Sahara Solitude had no lobby art. That's when I decided to track her movements. I opened her Instagram stories on her laptop. She always slept with her account open on my browser. There it was, a photo of her in a white sheep grove on a marble terrace, captioned "Morning Reflection." The geotag read, Hotel Aurelia. That was the sleek boutique hotel in the city center, exactly where the yoga retreat insisted there would be no internet, let alone scars of free Wi-Fi and room service menus. My stomach flipped. I closed the browser too quickly, but I'd seen enough. The retreat brochure promised digital silence. She'd broken that promise to me in the vaguest way. I packed a small duffel with essentials and drove to Hotel Aurelia that same afternoon, telling my roommate I had urgent errands. The lobby was grand, velvet armchairs, a concierge desk, fresh orchids. I tried to look casual as I asked the clerk, "Is there a guest named Bianca here for the silent retreat?" She looked surprised. "We don't have any silent retreats," she said, "but we do have a Ms. Bianca Thompson staying in suite 507. My heart pounded. I thanked her, strode past the valet, and took the elevator to the 5th floor. Suite 507 was elegant. Polished wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a balcony overlooking the city skyline. On the bed lay a monogrammed robe and a yoga mat that matched the winter posts. I pressed my palm to the glass and looked inside. There she was, hair undone, silk robe slipping at her shoulders, leaning against a man in a black t-shirt. They were laughing, champagne flutes in hand. The retreat soundtrack had given way to the hotel's jazz playlist. She spotted me through the glass, and her face went white. The man's arm wrapped tighter around her waist. She mouthed something, but I couldn't make it out. Then she slipped off the balcony and closed the window. I pressed my ear to the door and heard muffled whispers and a click. They were hiding. I knocked anyway. The door opened a crack, and Bianca peered out, robe rumpled. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice was panicked. I stepped inside. The man slipped behind her. "Explain," I said, voice low. She swallowed. "It's not what you think." I looked at him. He stepped forward, a hotel employee, apparently, or a friend of friends. His name badge read Rico. He offered a timid wave. "We were celebrating her progress," he said. She needed someone she trusted to guide her through the silent days. I shook my head. "You built this whole lie about a yoga retreat. You told me you'd be silent for a week." Bianca's eyes filled with tears. She closed the door behind me. "I needed a break from everything," she said. "That retreat was sold out. I couldn't get in. I panicked. He'd offered me his cousin's suite, said he'd pretend to be my guide. My chest ached. So you let me buy you a travel mug and send you off while you sipped champagne here." She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I thought you'd understand." I laughed, harsh and broken. "Understand. You turned our trust into a weekend fling." Rico cleared his throat. "Look, I'm sorry you had to find out like this." I glared at him. "You shouldn't be here." He shuffled backward. I turned to Bianca. "I need space." She reached out, but I held up my hand. I walked out without another word, the door clicking shut behind me. I spent the evening at a 24-hour cafe, drinking black coffee until it ran cold. I stared at my phone, half expecting a text. "I love you." But nothing came. I realized how hollow her promises sounded now. The next morning I returned home, packed my things, and moved in with my sister temporarily. I left a note. "I'm sorting out my thoughts. I'll be back when I'm ready." Back at the apartment, her travel mug still sat on the counter. I picked it up, felt the weight of it, empty now, like everything she said. After a day, I boxed it up with her robe and the yoga mat, planning to drop them off at the retreat office if she ever chose to go for real. For now, they belonged to the lie. Bianca called my phone nonstop, but I ignored her. She texted, pleading, and sorry. "I missed you." I needed real silence. I deleted each message. My heart twisted at the idea that she needed anything so badly she'd betray me. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my sister's door. She looked small, eyes red, robe wrapped around her, hair messy. I didn't answer. I peeked through the peephole and saw her leave a bag of snacks and a handwritten letter. I took the bag and read the letter. "I messed up. I'll never lie again. Please forgive me." I stared at the paper until tears blurred the ink. I crumpled it and tossed it away. Now, every time I see a yoga mat or hear wind chimes, I remember how easily a silent retreat can turn into a public spectacle. I still practice at home, sun salutations on our rooftop at dawn, soothing chants pulled from our speaker, but I keep the windows shut. Silence, I learned, isn't about where you go, it's about the honesty you carry inside. And until I see that in her, I'll keep my lips sealed. I'd never thought art could be a weapon until I stumbled into Devon's so-called solo exhibit and found empty walls and dusty pedestals. He'd been hyping it for months, telling me how proud he was, how he'd filled out the application, secured the gallery slot, and even printed postcards. He promised I'd be the first to see his latest pieces, each painting more personal than the last. So when opening night rolled around, I walked across town in my best dress, clutching a bottle of champagne, ready to toast his success. Instead, I got toasting alone. The gallery was in a renovated warehouse, white walls, high ceilings, the kind of place you imagined in Instagram posts. I arrived at 7, greeted by a sparse crowd of art enthusiasts sipping wine from plastic cups. I asked the host, some guy in a black turtleneck, where Devon's work was. He frowned and said he didn't know an exhibit by that name. I pulled out my phone, swiped through Devon's ticket confirmation, and showed it to him. He shook his head. Sorry, that show was canceled weeks ago. My stomach rolled. Canceled, I repeated. The host nodded. Supply issues. They refunded his fee. Sorry you came for nothing. I thanked him and wandered the empty space, hands swaying. My phone buzzed with a text from Devon. Running late, busy backstage. Be there soon. I stared at his words, my mind scrambling. Backstage. In a visual art gallery, I called him. Voicemail, I texted. What's going on? He replied, trust me. Then radio silence. I realized I'd been stood up. I left the gallery, popped open the champagne in my coat pocket, and let the cork shoot into the night sky. I sipped and stared at the glass, remembering how he laid out his dream months ago. The perfect palette, the crowd's applause, the gallery's purple lighting on his canvases. I buried the empty bottle in a trash bin and marched home. Later that night, sleep abandoned me. I tossed and turned, imagining gallery walls dripping with my disappointment. Sometime after midnight, I had an idea. One I knew might hurt, but I needed to know the truth. I got dressed, texted my roommate. Heading out for a bit. Don't worry. And I walked until I reached the old industrial loft district, where I knew Devon's ex lived in a converted warehouse. He'd mentioned the address in passing once, describing it as vibe perfect for a private show. I climbed the fire escape and reached a third-floor window left ajar. I peered inside. The loft was dim, lit by strings of Edison bulbs. Canvases leaned against the walls. My heart soared. These looked like Devon's signature abstract pieces. I saw the painting he'd shown me on my birthday, a swirl of cobalt and gold. But no crowd, no gallery staff, just Devon and a woman with dark curls tucked behind her ears, standing close. I slipped inside and crept toward them. They were mid-conversation, Devon's head tilted, as if he was listening to her laugh. She took his hand and guided him to a canvas. He pressed his palm into the wet paint, leaving a smudge. She giggled and did the same. I felt a punch of betrayal. My support had been funneled into this private playground. They noticed me then. The woman's smile faltered. She wore an artist's smock splattered with paint that matched Devon's. He stepped forward, guilt radiant on his face. Hey, he said, throat tight. I held up my phone. What's this? I opened his messages app. Had forgotten to lock his phone on the coffee table. In the thread with this woman, her name was Eloise. There were plans for this private show. Dates, times, even a playlist link called Intimate Gallery. I scrolled. Can't wait for you to see the new piece, Burning Wine. It was all here. I threw the phone at him. It slapped against the wooden floor and skidded to a stop. He crouched to pick it up, eyes watery. This was for her, I said, voice thick. He nodded, swallowing. She's an old flame. I wanted a safe space to share my work. No pressure, no critics. I laughed, bitter and hollow. No critics? What about me? I'm not safe enough. The woman. Eloise stood beside him, arms crossed. I'm sorry, she said quietly. We didn't plan to hurt you. I backed away, gaze flicking to the walls covered in his artwork. Each piece felt stained. I walked toward the door. So you lied to me. You canceled the gallery so you could host your ex in secret. He reached for my arm. I flinched. Let go. He did, shoulder slumping. I didn't want to mix my worlds, he said. The gallery was too big, too many eyes. I needed honest feedback. He sounded like he believed it, but I knew better. I turned and left, the door clicking shut. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave. I walked several blocks before I called a rideshare. I stared at the city passing by, neon signs blurring. In my pocket, Devon's phone vibrated with messages begging me to return. I silenced it. When I got home, I found our shared canvas by the door, blank, waiting for our next project. I dragged it to the trash bin and tossed it in. I stripped my bed of his pillowcases. I left his favorite coffee mug on the counter. Each trace of him felt toxic. In the days that followed, Devin left voicemails, flowers at my door, even an apology canvas with a single teardrop painted in red. I never picked it up. I let the wind claim it. Instead, I applied to show my own paintings at the upcoming community arts fair. It wasn't the city gallery, but it was honest. I spent nights in my studio, painting cobalt and gold swirls that no one would smear with their fingertips in secret. Opening day at the fair, I watched strangers admire my work, nod in appreciation, even chat with me about my process. One woman asked about the cobalt swirl, and I told her it represented trust, a color you don't mix lightly. She smiled, said it was beautiful. I realized then that sharing my art openly felt better than secrecy. It was a reminder that my work belonged to the world, not hidden in a private loft. I never went back to Devon. I haven't returned his calls or messages. His art, once my dream, now feels like someone else's project. And as I sold my first painting for real money, paper bills handed across a table under fluorescent lights, I knew I found my own gallery, built on honesty rather than hidden exhibitions. Clara had been talking about her semester in Barcelona for months, how she'd live in a student residence, take morning language classes, and spend weekends exploring museums. I helped her research flights, bookmark tapas bars, even lent her my old guidebook. Then one Sunday afternoon, I realized none of it was real. It hit me when I logged into her shared travel doc to double check her arrival date. I expected to see a Midland Atlanta Barcelona itinerary. Instead, there were ferry times from our hometown to Maple Isle, Friday evening out, Sunday night back. The document was labeled Clara's study abroad plans, but the actual entries were all this 2-day loop. My heart dropped like a stone. I stared at the screen, hands shaking. I thought, maybe she changed plans and forgot to update me. But underneath the ferry schedule was a note in her handwriting. Weekend with Jade booked. My breath caught. It was Julia, our high school friend who moved to the island with her family 2 years ago. They'd texted some vague weekend plans before, but I never thought it was a secret getaway. That same evening, Clara, texted me, "Can't do dinner tonight. Got to finish a group project for campus." She always spelled can't without an apostrophe and signed off with a lowercase k. I replied, "Okay, good luck." Then opened her travel doc again. I decided to follow her weekend pattern. Friday afternoon, I told my roommate I had a friend emergency and borrowed her car. I drove 2 hours east to the ferry terminal. Clara's name was on the passenger list. Just her, no university group, no chaperones. I watched her get on the boat in skinny jeans and a backpack, her hair pulled into a messy topknot. She waved, saw me on shore, panicked, ducked behind a column. The boat pull-out horn blew. It left without me. I debated calling her but didn't. Instead, I waited at the terminal until the late ferry back. Sunday morning, I drove back to the terminal, bought a cheap ticket, and boarded with locals hauling fishing gear. I scanned faces for hers. At the island end, I hopped off and saw her. Barefoot is weird for weekend clothes, stepping off the dock alongside Julia. They ran toward each other and hugged like they'd been separated for months. Not like two friends catching up, more like two people who'd counted down the hours apart. I kept to the edge of the dock until they turned. Clara saw me and froze. Julia looked between us and smiled nervously. Clara muttered something under her breath, like shit, then grabbed her backpack and started walking inland. Julia stayed with me on the dock. I said, "What's going on?" She shrugged. Clara's, well, she said she needed space. Her eyes were sad. I wanted answers. "Why are you on the island every weekend?" Julia's lip quivered. Well, she trailed off. I waited. "She's in love," Julia whispered. With me, my chest tightened. This was worse than I thought. I shook my head. Why not just say so? Julia's bird-like shoulders dipped. She was scared. She thought you and everyone would judge. I closed my eyes. Clara had told me she felt a connection with Julia back in school, late-night chats, shared notebooks full of divils. But she never said more. I grabbed my phone. "Where's the study abroad docs?" I asked. Julia looked sad. She wrote them. It was her excuse to get away to see me. The ferry horn blared behind me. The next boat back to town started boarding. I looked at Julia. Are you going to leave without me? She hesitated. I can't, I sighed. We're leaving now. She nodded, and we climbed the ramp together. On the boat, I sat stiffly, hands on my knees, while Julia stared at the waves. I thought about the flights I'd booked, the language apps I'd downloaded for Clara. They meant nothing. I felt angry, about lies, about hidden texts, about borrowed guidebooks that would now go unused. When we docked back on the mainland, I drove us home in silence. My roommate was surprised to see me at 3 p.m. without an emergency. I said I had a project meeting. I dropped Julia at the nearest bus stop. She'd said she lived with her parents on a remote ridge, no street address. Before she got off, she turned and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I watched her go. That night, I sat at my desk and opened Clara's travel doc. Her itinerary had a new entry. Delete. She erased every word. I tried to message her, "We need to talk." Read receipt, no reply. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I left a message. Call me. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was stupid. "I'm sorry, we didn't mean to hurt you." No signature. I replied, "Who is this?" Nothing. I realized she blocked me. Later that day, I found a note slipped under our apartment door. I needed a reason to leave. No name. I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. She'd admitted needing space, but the need for honesty she never addressed. For the next week, I avoided the terminal and deleted the downloaded guidebook images from my phone. I kept an eye on my messages, but none came from Clara. I talked to Julia once by text. "I don't hate you. I hate the lies." She replied, "I get it. I'll leave you alone. Take care." I didn't reply. A month later, I sat on our balcony with my old guidebook in my lap. I realized I still loved reading travel stories, the part where the narrator learns from deviance and returns changed. I flipped to the chapter on Barcelona and read about tapas bars, Gothic quarter plazas, and the scent of orange blossoms in spring. I decided I'd go alone someday. No excuses needed. Now when I see ferry schedules, they're just schedules, no false hope. And when I think of Clara, I don't feel that hollow ache. I feel ready to write my own itinerary, honest and unfiltered, no geotags to hide behind. I never suspected that academic ambition could double as a bedtime story, until I walked into the college library at midnight looking for Mads and found an empty row of desks and a window cracked open to the lake. She'd been telling me she was holding late-night tutoring sessions every Thursday, helping students cram for exams, sharing lecture notes, and leading group reviews. I believed her, even bragged about her dedication to my friends. Then one Thursday I decided to surprise her with coffee and pastries, and everything unraveled. I showed up at 11:45 p.m., coffee cup in hand, ready to cheer on her troop of wide-eyed students. Instead, the library was silent, lights dimmed, and the main study room locked. I texted her, "Hey, table 5, coffee's here." No reply. I wandered through the stacks until I found a sticky note on a bulletin board. Midnight lecture, lakeside cabin, dock entrance. My heart skipped. Lakeside Cabin wasn't part of campus. It was a faculty retreat by the water. I hopped on my bike and pedaled through back roads until the campus buildings fell behind me and tall pines towered overhead. The cabin lights glowed under the stars. I crept forward, careful not to crack a twig under my wheel. Through the window I saw her, Mads, standing in front of a chalkboard set up on the porch, chalk in hand, pacing while a tall man in a collared shirt sat on a folding chair, notebook open. She was drawing diagrams, pointing with enthusiasm, leaning in his direction like she belonged there more than with any student crowd. I braked and lost my breath. This was supposed to be a free tutoring session for undergrads, not a private talk with her professor. My chest tightened. I unhooked my bike, locked it to a post, and edged closer. The professor looked up, smiled in a way that made my skin crawl, and nodded at Mads. They shared a laugh. He stepped forward, traced a circle on the board for her, then stepped back to whisper something that made her laugh too. I felt like I'd walked onto someone else's secret stage. I knocked on the porch railing. Mads and the professor froze. She turned, eyes wide. "Hey," I called softly. The professor stood, smoothed his tie, and held out a hand. "You must be." I glared at him, and he let his hand drop. Mad slipped from in front of the board and came to me. I can explain, she mouthed, but her voice wasn't loud enough. I crossed my arms. This is your tutoring session. My voice shook. She looked down, then gestured at her notebook on the bench. Lecture outlines, assignment deadlines, all marked with times that coincided with these cabin meetups. She said she'd recorded everything for her own review, then emailed notes to students the next morning so no one knew she was gone. I grabbed her notes and flipped through. Margin notes to ask Dr. L about method, run data with L. L stood for the professor's first initial. The professor stepped forward. I invited her to refine her research ideas with me, he said politely. It's academic collaboration. I laughed. By hiding in a cabin at midnight, he shrugged. It's confidential until published. Mad said I didn't want anyone to judge. I thought I could manage both. I shoved the notes back into her arms. You lied to me and to your students. She fell silent. I left the cabin without another word, my bike tumbling as I pushed it away. My mind raced with betrayal. She used late-night tutoring as cover for secret research sessions that were clearly more personal than professional. I pedaled hard back to campus, the wind stinging my face. When I got home, I collapsed on the couch, clutching my coffee cup now cold. That weekend I tried to reach her. I texted, called, emailed, we need to talk, nothing. On Monday morning, I saw flyers around campus advertising her tutoring hours in the library. Same times, Thursday midnight, table 5. My stomach churned. I realized she tried to erase every trace of her absence. I grabbed a marker and the nearest sticky note, wrote "No Mads tonight," and stuck it to the flyer. Then I waited. Thursday came. I set my alarm for 11:30 p.m., grabbed a thermos of coffee, and biked to the library. I settled at table 5 and watched the clock. Midnight passed. No sign of her. My heart pounded. Then I saw her silhouette through the window. She slipped in, head down, hood up, empty coffee cup in hand. She sat across from me. I stared as she took off her hood, forcing my anger down. She met my gaze, pale and guilty. I cleared my throat. How many Thursdays? I asked quietly. She looked away. 4, she whispered. I sighed. You owe your students the truth. She nodded. I'll cancel tonight's session and send an email. I stood. And you can explain to me, honestly, what those cabin meetings were. She looked at the floor, then at me. Research collaboration, she said. And I didn't want you to worry. I picked up my coffee and said, worrying beats lying. She followed me out. We walked to my bike. I handed her a helmet. Ride back with me. I asked, she nodded. As we pedaled under the library lights, she held my hand briefly. I let her. She said she understood why I was hurt. I said I'd need time. She promised no more secrets. Months later, she set a proper research seminar in daylight, open to students and faculty. She told the truth up front. This was her capstone project with a professor, and all tutoring sessions were moved to 7 p.m. in the study lounge. She introduced me at the front row. I smiled, sipping coffee. Her eyes met mine, honest this time, and that felt worth more than any midnight apology. Why I've been talking nonstop about this weekend retreat he was running for veterans. Intense obstacle courses at dawn, trust falls in mud pits, hardcore strength training by lantern light. I helped him pack his gear. Camo shorts, trail shoes, protein powder. I was so proud of him paying it forward to those who served. Then Friday morning, I checked his location and saw Emerald Springs Spa and Resort. My heart sank. Obley left early Friday with his duffel full of gear and a whistle around his neck. He said he'd be back Sunday evening, exhausted but fulfilled. I pictured him muddy and triumphant, swapping stories with battle-hardened vets. Instead, his tracker pointed to a gated entrance with marble pillars, a valet in pressed slacks, and a sign that read Emerald Springs Spa and Resort. I stared at my phone. That was 5 miles from the forest clearing he described. I felt like I'd been handed a cheat code to a secret level I never wanted to find. I texted him, boot camp location. Your tracker says resort. No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. My stomach churned. I threw on sneakers, grabbed the car keys, and drove over under the pretense of dropping off extra protein bars. At the front desk of the spa, I asked the concierge, is there a Mr. Obai here for a scheduled training session? She arched an eyebrow. We have Mr. Obed Jackson checking in for a couple's retreat. My chest tightened. I nodded, thanked her, and slipped past the grand chandelier into the corridor. The hallway smelled like lavender and mint. I followed signs to the wellness couple suites. Outside room 214, I paused. The door opened a crack and I saw him. Obi, towel around his waist, hair damp, leaning against the door jamb. Next to him was a woman in a silk robe, her arms draped around his shoulders as they whispered and laughed. My throat closed up. He spotted me, face going pale. The woman stepped back, robe shifting. Obi wiped his hair and said, "Hey you, why are you here?" I crossed my arms. "Boot camp," I asked. His shoulders slumped. "It's complicated." I stepped inside. The suite was palatial, minibar stocked with fruit-infused water, a private hot tub in the corner, plush armchairs, and a balcony overlooking a fountain. No sandbags, no tires to flip, no battle ropes in sight. He gestured to a brochure on the coffee table. It advertised spa packages, aromatherapy, couples massage, gourmet meals. I picked it up, flipping through pages. Every weekend package matched his timeline. I looked at the woman. She removed her robe completely, revealing a spy uniform with a name tag. Cynthia, veteran liaison. The same woman whose husband he said needed support. I slammed the brochure down. "This is your boot camp." My voice cracked. Obi's eyes dropped. Cynthia said softly, "He's been helping me with my workouts." My husband was deployed recently. I stared at her. "So you swapped sob stories in the sauna instead of push-ups on the trail," she frowned. "I don't know what you mean." Obi ran a hand through his hair. "She went charity package and asked me to be her fitness coach," he mumbled. "It was for veterans." My chest burned. "For veterans?" I repeated. "You said the vets were training with you." He nodded. I repurposed it. I thought I could help her transition back to normal life. I shook my head by sneaking off to a honeymoon suite. I looked around at the massage stones and flickering candles. "This is a couple's retreat, not a Marine Corps boot camp." Obi's shoulders sagged. "We did some circuits in the courtyard at dawn." I raised an eyebrow. "The courtyard's a koi pond and flower beds." He tried to explain. "It was part of the Serenity workout. I led a group of fellow attendees in light cardio." I scoffed. "Light cardio. You promised obstacle courses under moonlight." Cynthia stepped forward. "I'm sorry you found out this way." I stared at her. "You're a veteran's spouse. He used your package to hide behind." She winced. "He's a good coach." My jaw clenched. "You're all strangers in robes, not a unit sticking together." I turned to Obi. "We move mountains for a cause. You move pillows for a photo op." I stormed out of the suite, leaving them stunned. The lobby piano tinkled softly. I crossed to the valet and grabbed my car keys. Obi walked in behind me. "Please," he said, "let's talk." I shook my head. "Talk after you stop lying." I locked the car and sat inside, rolling down the window. He leaned against the door. I thought I was doing good. I bristled. "I thought you were building something real." The valet inquired if I needed help. I said no. Obi called after me, but I drove off, heart pounding. The city lights blurred through tears. I realized how deep the betrayal cut, not just a lie about weekend plans, but a misuse of trust for something so self-serving. That night I slept on the guest room couch, throwing covers over the cushions. Obi texted, "I'm sorry. I'll change." I read it and deleted it. I couldn't handle more promises. I needed space, clarity, and something honest. Saturday morning, I pulled on my sneakers, packed a small bag, and signed up for a Real Community Boot Camp at Oakwood Forest. Registration was open online, real vets and civilians joining forces. I tipped a water bottle into my bag and drove to the clearing. When I arrived, there was a line of muddy tires, camo nets, rope swings, and a group of determined faces under oak canopies. No marble pillars in sight. The coach introduced herself, Captain Torres, retired Air Force. She welcomed everyone and said, "This weekend we trained together, no judgments." I nodded and joined the warm-up. We did bear crawls, wall climbs, sprints, and trust falls. My muscles screamed, but my heart raced with a real sense of purpose. I high-fived a Marine who said, "Glad you're here." I laughed and said, "Me too." By midday, I felt sweat and satisfaction. Captain Torres gave us protein shakes and snacks. The air smelled of pine and dirt, not spa oils. I closed my eyes, breathing hard. This is what healing looked like: a shared struggle, honest sweat, supportive nods. I thought about Obai in his resort room, sipping tea and dodging accountability. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat on a log and pulled out my phone. I typed a text to Obai. I found a real boot camp. I'll keep going. If you want to talk, find me here next weekend. I hit send and felt a lightness I hadn't known in days. Sunday afternoon, I left Oakwood filled with genuine pride, my shirt caked with mud and my spirit renewed. I texted Captain Torres. Thank you. She wrote back, anytime. I smiled. Back home, I unpacked my bag, stripping the guest couch of its covers. Obi's texts were still unread. I deleted the last one. I realized that real support doesn't come with scented candles or sweet upgrades. It comes with grit, honesty, and a willingness to get dirty together. And if he ever wants in on that, I'll be waiting under the oaks, not in a spa lobby.